welcome back to another arousing edition of Beer Field. I am your host, at Hot BFF with 2 P's. As always, joined by Dan Thury BFF, 2S. Dan.
It's a great it's a great day. It's a great time because we are not only here with their buddy Chris Allen, we are joined in by a overly sexualized Blake Bortles, which is right behind you.
Hold on.
In motion.
Can you over-sexualize somebody that's just a blatant sex icon like Blake Bortles?
Maybe. I don't know if you can overly sexualize it, but we can definitely be overly aroused by it.
So I got something for you, and we'll introduce Chris here in just a second, even though it really needs no introduction. I got something for you, though. So I was in Walgreens the other day to pick up, looking for infant water, and it was the only Walgreens in the area that was open till midnight. And they had this weird pack hanging in the trading card section. It was just like this generic picture of a football player. And I'm like, well, let me grab this and see what it's about. And I open it up, and it's full of, like, older trading cards, just an assortment, and then, like, college packs, randomly enough. Like, there's a Chris Bosh card and a Georgia Tech pack because that somehow means football. But I got a Blake Bortles UCF card out of that.
Oh, nice.
And a hollow Kenyon Barner. But, hollow. Yeah. Hey, Alex, thanks. Yeah, we're going to try to do more of that. Last week's format, we did a beer bracket. So we did a craft beer. Basically, we had 8 of them, I think. And broke it down and ran through that way. This will be closer to the episode we did before with Stompy. Without further ado, though, I guess let me introduce the show and introduce our guests. So it's going to be we're obviously going to talk the Sam Darnold trade and everything that's gone on in the NFL over the last week. Talk a little bit of rookies, but a large part of this episode is going to be homebrew talk. And Dan has an interest in it. I attempt to do it. Chris does it very well. So we're going to talk a lot of homebrew, the art that is that. Get a little bit more into the beer side of a Beer Field. Is kind of a nice, easy episode before we start hitting the draft really hard next week in the ramp up to that. So before we jump into it, though, we do have our guest. If you haven't figured that out yet, we've gone 3 minutes now without introducing him, so I'm going to do that. Contributor for 444 Football, Number Fire, NBC Sports Edge, formerly Roto World, DLF, co-host of the Dynasty Manual podcast, master homebrewer, the man, the myth, the soon-to-be legend, Chris Allen. Chris, how are you?
I don't even know if I can follow up on that, man. I just appreciate you guys having me on. It's been too long, gentlemen.
It has.
Yeah, but this is great. I mean, I'm happy to hop back on with you guys, and yeah, but some news before the draft. I'm happy to talk ball. I'm definitely looking forward to that. But yeah, let's talk about some hobbies, man. Let's talk about some homebrew. So let's get into it.
Have some fun, shall we?
Yes.
All right. Let's go ahead and get straight into it. We're going to talk homebrew, but we're also drinking, so we got to introduce that first as we start off every episode.
Yep.
What's fueling Beer Field?
Dan, why don't you go ahead and start us?
Boom. All right, I am drinking local to my area, Hand of Fate. This is their new beer called Hopstrosity. This is a double dry hop triple IPA. On the label itself, and I briefly talked about this with Hopper yesterday, they dip hopped. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, Chris. I went and did some nerd out research on it at work because it was, I was like, did they mean to put something else? I've never heard of it. I've never heard of dip hopping before. So they dipped hopped and then obviously dry hopped this IPA with the Citra, Mosaic, Amarillo, Otto 7, and Simcoe.
Interesting. Now, I've heard about dip hopping. That's like a Japanese technique, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Yeah. I've never tried it myself. It definitely looks interesting. I'm just wondering. I've always wondered how the flavor profiles change and what utilization rates that you get out of the hops if you do it that way.
Yeah.
But I'm planning on trying it here within the next like few months. I'll probably try it over the summer because those types of hops that you just mentioned, I mean, those go great with like summer beers.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I guess during the research, it brings up as another way to help do to help lower the bitterness and to help bring out the hop aromas and everything like that.
Yeah.
So it's like a more of a nerd out way, I guess, to say it, instead of doing the whole dry hop, thing where it takes no bitterness to it.
It looks like it's like flame out, but turned up to 11 basically, except not really.
Yeah.
That's just doing a quick read up on it. We'll talk about hop schedules and stuff here in a little bit. We're gonna go
Nerd out.
way nerd here in just a minute, but yeah, we'll talk about hop schedules and why that adds aroma and some of the different ways you can get that here coming up. So I've actually got, as part of this, I've got some homebrew here with me. So I got two things. I've got the very, very last of a Poblano Amber Ale, which was supposed to be a porter, but there was an accident there. So I want to drink this and talk about the recipe there. And then I've got a just bottled 2 weeks ago, still bottle conditioning session IPA, done with Ariana, Sabro, and Eldorado hops. So more on that coming up as well.
Very nice. Very nice.
What do you got,
This
Chris?
for me. So I wanted to at least show you guys this. I just finished it earlier, and that's what's sitting on like my wall of fame that you guys see back behind me. And I'm constantly adding to it. But this is a Dunkelweizen by Great Lakes Brewery. And for anybody that doesn't know me and my beer taste, I'm definitely not a beer snob. I mean, if you catch me on the right weekend, you'll probably see me sipping a can of Colt 45. But like I'm a sucker for can art. I mean, if the can looks good, I mean, your beer could just be absolute piss water, and you'll probably sucker me into buying a 6-pack. But this is actually this is pretty legit. I mean, Great Lakes. I don't think I've tried something that I haven't really liked from them. But just the combination of flavors that they have in here. So it's an ale with chocolate, orange peel, and cold brew coffee.
Oh, nice.
Which definitely it piqued my interest. And the blend that they used in order to put this together was just absolutely perfect. The coffee aroma hits your nose, but then from the flavor perspective, you definitely get the orange peel like right off the bat, and then the chocolate just immediately smooths that over. And I mean, it's a very well balanced blend of flavors that you wouldn't typically think would go together. And so I really like the way that they put this one together. I would really love to find a like a clone recipe and try some. I'd probably screw it up and add more, too much orange peel or something like that. But I think for what it is, I mean, at 6.5% ABV, I think this is a solid beer.
Well, and it's a Dunkelweizen. You said it was a Dunkelweizen?
Yeah.
With adjuncts. That's rare in and of itself, because
exactly
most of the time when you're brewing a Dunkelweizen, that beer has so much flavor regardless. Most people just let it stand on its own.
Right, just from the grain bill, like you typically wouldn't add a bunch of stuff to it. So that's why it's like a Dunkel with chocolate, orange peel, and cold brew. All right, let me just go ahead and get a 6-pack of this. And I was looking at the can. I was looking at the can art too, and I was like, yeah, you got me. You got me.
Can you lift the can up again?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It reminded me of some pipework stuff. Like I still work for Benny's, and I see a lot of Great Lakes stuff
for now.
And it does, right for now. It doesn't like they did a whole revamp of their packaging, and that may be the first thing I saw that actually looks.
It looks good.
Fantastic from them in terms of the can art.
Yeah.
Well,
I was really impressed.
And good on them as far as revamping their artwork and everything, because, I mean, we know Great Lakes. We've had them on the show, but packaging definitely didn't draw you to it on the shelves, given everything that was around it beforehand.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Yeah. We'll just go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into some news here real quick. Just a couple items to talk about, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. We're going to get the football out of the way so we can talk about the important stuff.
Yep. Football first.
Eagles signed Jordan Howard to a 1-year deal. This is it's a depth signing, so don't
freak out.
Don't start a Jordan Howard hype train.
Great for Miles Sanders.
Yeah, great for Miles Sanders.
Right, exactly. Bengals released running back Gio Bernard, so end of an era there. Also, watch for somebody to land in Cincinnati. The reason I say that, well, Joe Mixon's good and is the unquestioned starter and going to have bell cow workload. Joe Mixon also has problems staying on the field. So,
But your boy Samaje Perine is the backup. I don't think they'll draft really. Like they may spend a day 3 pick.
yeah.
Guy, but I don't think there's no need for them to go out. They have too many other issues.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be somebody they draft, right? You get a day 2, day
True.
3 pick. You have depth. I mean, we've seen it with like Brian Hill, Smith, Justin Jackson, guys like that are picked up 6th, 7th round, 4th, whatever.
Yeah.
They have intermittent value because they're handcuffed at that point. So something to watch.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In larger news, we'll save the larger news for the end. In not larger news, but something to be aware of, and if you're a Bears fan like me, throw things about Matt Nagy going to return to play calling duties for the 2021 season after relinquishing them in 2020. So, don't expect great things.
Just fire that whole staff.
Right.
Yes.
You did well. Should have been done this year. I've said it a ton on the show. Should have been done this year. And then when everybody was pissed off about the Andy Dalton signing, I was happy about the Andy Dalton signing, not because I'm stoked about Andy Dalton, because that means the fact that they signed a 1-year bridge quarterback tells me that at least whoever replaces Nagy and Pace at the end of this year is going to have, draft capital and not a giant quarterback contract to go out and get their guy and not be side saddled with somebody from a previous regime. So the Andy Dalton signing, I was fine with it in that light because I have to deal with mediocrity for another year, but at least it's a true reset starting next season.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
And other things that make sense, Panthers acquired Sam Darnold from the Jets in exchange for a 2021 6th rounder and a 2022 2nd and 4th rounder.
So they're also trying to move Teddy Bridgewater. I think that's the other big note. They've come out and said that this does not exclude them from taking a quarterback at pick 8. Who knows if they move Teddy? I think that's what they'll do. If they don't, then they may just wait till next year. Good on the Jets for getting a 2nd round pick even for next year. I think that's a fantastic move for them. That gives them more top 50 picks because we know the Panthers probably won't be a great team in this upcoming year. I mean, they may surprise some people. They have good. They still have good offensive pieces. Now, I do like how they're building their defense, but that's still a very strong division.
Yeah, but it doesn't set up as a team that's necessarily going to have high draft capital. They could have middling draft capital.
No, I'm saying wherever Carolina ends up, I think that 2nd round pick, there's a good chance that's a top 50 pick.
Yeah,
top 50 pick at it. I mean, they would have to be a playoff team. The Panthers would have to be a playoff team for that pick not to be.
Well, the question: do you still believe in Darnold at only 23 years old and the talent that was there, and that he was really side saddled by the coaching staff and side saddled by kind of a lack of weapons? Like, do you believe in that? And do you believe that the Panthers do use the number 8 pick on a quarterback and bring in some competition? Because that's the other thing to keep in mind with this draft class. Picking 8th doesn't mean the guy that's coming in, if they use it on a quarterback, is an immediate starter. We expect the guys with the immediate starter capital to be gone by pick 8. So,
I mean, it's going to all depend. Like we've seen quarterbacks come in, during, training camp and preseason, earn their spot. My guess would be if they pick that, if they take that player at pick 8, it'll likely be either Trey Lance or Justin Fields. I think based on all the rumors that we've been hearing, and then based on how you feel about them starting to start day 1, sure. You'll probably hear them say, well, Sam Darnold's our starter, and they'll say that up until we've are shown and proven that the rookie quarterback is a better prospect, or at least is a better player to play from day 1, than Sam Darnold. Darnold still also has to beat out Teddy Bridgewater if they don't get him. And it's not like there's a massive step up, between talent-wise. It's all based on fit, and we'll see what happens with it. I just don't think the Panthers are going to be a playoff team this year. So that's why I think it was a good move for the Jets to get essentially a top 50 pick in next year's draft.
that's fair.
Yeah. That's all. That's really what it is.
I like the really, I like the trade for both teams because while the Jets get another top 50 pick, the Panthers didn't give up a whole lot, and it's a high upside type play. Sam Darnold's a guy that most everybody liked coming out of SC. He was an early declare, so he's still only 23 years old, super young, ton of talent, and as we belabored on the show, is a guy that wasn't necessarily set up for success. He had the bout with mono, which for anybody that's had it, like completely zaps your strength and any form of ability to do much. And then he had the bout with Adam Gase, which is also a disease, probably worse than mono. And then your number one receiver is Robbie Anderson. You had no running game, so to speak, of the entirety of his career to help take pressure off of him. The defense was relatively terrible, at least the last 2 seasons. He wasn't in a position to develop or do well. So with him landing in Carolina, that kind of changes. And it's a good upside trade for them because it gives them a starter that can help them win. If it pans out and Darnold is as talented as I think Sam Darnold is, then they got a steal. And it's going to show this year because he does have weapons around him. Like Dan mentioned, you've got DJ Moore. You've got his back with Robbie Anderson, but you got
Right.
yeah.
I've seen those memes. Those have been great memes.
You got Christian McCaffrey. I expect them to probably add a receiver at some point. I mean, they've got weapons there. And the defense, Jeremy Chin, great pick last year. They have good pieces on defense, and the defense was playing better than what I thought it should have, and they have a good, young, offensive-minded head coach. Darnold's in a position to succeed here. If you're in a super flex league, I'm kicking the tires to see if I can subsequently get a similarly low-valued deal, but I'm doing it after the draft because if they do take a guy like Justin Fields or Trey Lance, I still expect Darnold's a starter. We know my feelings on Trey Lance, which is I think he's an awesome talent, but I think he, small school guy is going to come in and develop and not be handed the job. It's kind of like Jalen Hurts. Is going to come in and not necessarily be handed the job, even though he's supremely talented. And could make the same argument for, Justin Fields just had some holes in his game that I didn't necessarily like. And, you'd be saying the same thing if it was like a Mac Jones going here, or if for some reason it's a guy like Kyle Trask or Kellen Mond. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the quarterback is outside of the top 3. It's kind of the same scenario where I expect Darnold's going to get a chance to prove it. And I still think he has the talent to prove it and the pieces to prove it.
What are your thoughts, Chris, on this?
I'm of 2 minds on this one, where I get the idea that I get the allure of pairing a quarterback that we've seen have like legitimate QB1 week, like not the overall QB1, but at least top 12 weeks. Hasn't happened a lot, but I get that. And now combining him with a more pass-friendly offense, a more pass-happy offense. Carolina was, over the past couple of seasons, I think they were 8th in neutral passing rate in 2019, but then after the switch to Rule and Brady, I think they fell back to about 12th or 13th in neutral passing rate this past season. So, I mean, that gives Darnold more opportunities to shine. He has the weapons around him in order to, I guess, at least elevate his play, or at least bail him out like when he needs to. So I get that. On the other hand, in my head, I'm almost thinking, well, weren't we saying the same things about Teddy Bridgewater last season?
Well, I wasn't, but
like a lot of folks were.
I know.
They were talking themselves into like, well, like Teddy Bridgewater, like now, like okay, so Teddy Bridgewater, he just had Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, but now he gets Christian McCaffrey, he gets DJ Moore, he gets Curtis Samuel, he gets they brought in Robbie Anderson. So now Teddy Bridgewater QB1, let's do it. And it's like I'm trying to squint and see like the same and have the same amount of optimism for Sam Darnold, but since he came into the league in 2018, he ranks 50th out of 58 passers in terms of overall EPA per play since 2018, 45th in completion percentage over expected. It's like, I get all the things that have happened to him. He's been gaced. He had a bad offense. I mean, his only weapon was Robbie Anderson for a time. I mean, and it's no slander to Jamison Crowder, don't get me wrong, but we've seen offenses try to operate through a slot receiver.
It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yep.
So I get the context of his situation, but you think that he would at least be able to elevate the talent around him. And we haven't seen him be able to do that. So I'm just kind of meh on the whole thing. And I guess, and also from a team building perspective, why would the Panthers go out and essentially dump all this money into Teddy Bridgewater, because he still has like a hefty dead cap hit this season? So why dump all this money into Teddy? And if you want to do this hard reset at the quarterback position, how is Sam Darnold your answer? Now, I get that they were in the hunt for Deshaun Watson, and his current situation completely took him off the table. But still, how do you go from possible Deshaun Watson to Sam Darnold, and then also not try and move into this, and also essentially not do the same thing that San Francisco did, move up in the draft so that they can put themselves in a position to get one of these quarterbacks. So if they want to fight over, Trey Lance, or I don't know, whomever is going to, if they think that it's going to go Lawrence, Wilson, Jones, and they need to move up in order to possibly, I mean, Fields could be still sitting there at 8.
Mm-hmm.
It's entirely possible. But if they felt that they needed to in order to get a quarterback in this draft class, then I thought that they would have made a push and move any draft capital that they have in order to secure that spot, in order to just like tell the league, like, we're on the quarterback hunt. Mm-hmm. Signing a guy or making a trade with those assets that they did in order to get Sam Darnold, it doesn't indicate to me that they're still in the quarterback hunt. It's possible, but if they were going to make this hard reset, I think that they should have done it with a little bit more oomph to it, because like you pointed out, I think, Dan, you were saying it earlier. I mean, this is not a team that's going to the playoffs this year. There's no way that they're contending with, I mean, there's no way they're beating out Tampa. That's for damn sure. And at best, I mean, they're behind Atlanta, or maybe competing with Atlanta.
It depends on how badly Atlanta underperforms again.
Right. I mean, they might competing with Atlanta, but then I don't see how they get past New Orleans. I mean, regardless of what you think about the New Orleans quarterback position, I mean, their defense is still going to run right over them. So this is not, they're still going to be in the same spot that they were at the end of this season as they were last season.
Yeah.
Fair.
With no draft capital in order to improve their situation in 2022.
Well, I mean, so if they've given Teddy the ability to seek a trade, which might be hard at this point, I mean, there is a chance that they recoup that second rounder or a third rounder and flip that. I think they still have their first next year. As far as Bridgewater goes, it's kind of an interesting perspective to compare, for me, my feelings on Bridgewater versus Darnold, because, again, I was not one of them that was pounding the table of Teddy Bridgewater QB1. It was Teddy Bridgewater game manager. This is CMC's offense, but adequate game manager, and he was. I think that the biggest difference in my evaluation comes in kind of from a raw talent and arm talent type of perspective, if you will. But I agree with, elevating the talent around you and that type of stuff. But, like, I guess the only other point to belabor there is, I mean, when the talent around you is Braxton Berrios and Quincy Enunwa outside of Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder, like,
that's a massive upgrade for
it's
Darnold
like
from across.
It's like Dan trying to elevate me every week. It just doesn't.
Ooh, it's a tough task. Sometimes it pays off. I'm like a co-host one every now and then, but generally I play at the 2 level.
That was an
insult
to myself. Yeah.
That's why I get the allure. It's just, man, I'm trying not to be like negative, like no slander against him, because he has been dealt a raw deal, absolutely. But I mean, how much can we really see the Panthers as an entire offensive unit improving under Sam Darnold?
Right. Well,
and
the other thing is too is it's a 1-year investment, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a 1-year investment. If they do take somebody at 8, which I'm assuming would be Trey Lance or Justin Fields, you get a chance to see that development and decide if that's it or not. But I also kind of agree with you that spending that draft capital to me takes them out of the quarterback race. Because if you do draft Trey Lance and Justin Fields, you either better be sure, and if you're sure, you better be at least leapfrogging Detroit to get there, which is only one position, but you still better at least be leapfrogging Detroit. And if you're not sure, what you're basically saying is, I'm going to invest my first-round pick in quarterbacks in back-to-back drafts.
Right, which makes no sense.
Exactly.
Makes no sense.
Well,
When you don't play, when I don't think they're in, an Arizona situation where they're in for a regime change or anything like that. So,
and I haven't done a ton of in-depth look at the 2022 class, but from everything that I've heard so far, it doesn't seem like the prospects coming out next year from a quarterback perspective even hold a candle to what we've got right now.
Not.
Yeah.
It's like 19 level step. You don't have a Kyler Murray, like unless like a Spencer Rattler, or like I think he's the one person that a lot of us are holding on to, hoping that he elevates himself to that play. Because I don't see it from Sam Howell, and I don't expect it from a Keaton Slovis. So yes, you're right. At least right now, without anything being played for next year, it's a pretty weak quarterback class.
Right.
yeah, I mean, you figure the guys you just mentioned, and then, Desmond Ridder is probably your tier 2 there. I mean,
It depends how he has to have a strong.
He's got to have another strong year
in Cincinnati. So
it's just one of those things that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you. But the reason they could be in play for a quarterback there is, looking at the order, I do assume, I am of the opinion that it goes Lawrence, Wilson, McCorkle, and then you have Atlanta, who is trying to move back. So, I mean, possibility.
Broncos are moving up for sure. I think the Broncos are going to move up.
See, I think Carolina could still try to, with the 2022 first in hand and stuff, could still try to make a play to jump up to 4. But, also it's just looking at the positional needs in front of him. Since he's not spending a first-round pick on a quarterback, Miami's pretty much told us that they're not. And Detroit traded for Jared Goff. They probably should spend a first-round pick on a quarterback. But if they do, you're still going to get the door prize of Trey Lance or Justin Fields, which you're okay with.
Both.
Yeah.
I'd be great with both of them. So, I mean, if it happens, we talk about this as a dream landing spot almost because of the playmakers around and because of the minds. I think people believe that, Matt Rule and Joe Brady can bring a lot of excitement when they get their own guy. So I don't know if I'm sold on them taking a quarterback at pick 8. We're going to see, because if they like Darnold and if they believe in Darnold, they're not picking a quarterback at 8 there. They may try to, either piece together that defense a bit more or add another high-end playmaker to the offense and then really see what they have.
Yeah.
But we beat this horse.
We did indeed.
Pretty bloody.
Beat this horse. Let him go grab Pitts.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Anyway,
he's there. I don't think he's not gonna be at a pick. I mean, I've seen mocks from land that he's not.
Well, Hawkinson, Gesicki. So unless Cincy or Atlanta does it,
Cincinnati takes Kyle Pitts.
Yeah,
Cincinnati just take Kyle Pitts. That city will burn to the ground.
Yeah, well,
and that's my city, man. It's just
as Joe Burrow, goes the Andrew Luck way because they refuse to put actual
put an offensive line around him. We got you another move tight end.
Yeah, exactly.
I keep seeing the Jamar Chase. I would love to see him Lander, but I also want to see Burrow play a full season. So
I don't want to see. Yeah, Chase Landing there would hurt T. Higgins. You don't hurt T. Higgins.
Maybe.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Dan, I'll let you lead the question and answer portion.
We're going to do just one more rookie question, and then we're going to jump into the actual homebrew part of it. I just got to ask you because obviously you're embedded into the football industry. I know you're on a bit of a break, and we're going to definitely pick your mind about beer. But I got to ask you in the show, and we got to talk about some rookies some more. Just one question: who are your favorite rookie prospects? Doesn't have to be. It can be high end, can be some low end guys. Just who's getting you excited?
I would say the one because wide receivers has kind of been my thing. Because when I came into the industry, I was following Matt Harmon a lot in his process. Actually, just got a chance to talk with him last Friday on a show that I was doing. Great dude talk to if you ever get a chance to. But
Love
wide receivers are kind of my thing, and it cracks me up that a guy like Jamar Chase can take a year off and still be like far and away one of the best like receivers in this class. And it's almost, to me, it's almost not even close. And that's just my personal opinion. And I think a lot of folks like have like Jamar Chase up as their wide receiver one.
Yep.
But like just flip on his tape, watch a few games, and like most of folks, y'all know me. I look at it, I approach things more from an analytical perspective.
Yep.
And once you break him down and look at, 3.5 yards per route run, according to PFF, that's ridiculous. Like for a college prospect, his success rates against man and press coverage. The guy is he's your prototypical like wide receiver one. His ability to beat man press coverage at, I think it's like over at about a 90% success rate, almost a 50% contested catch rate. It's ridiculous that, that he was able to, when he opted out, obviously like LSU, they still had playmakers or whatever, behind him, but it's just, he takes the year off. Obviously still working. Takes the year off is probably, oversimplifying the situation, but he's still by far and away one of the better receivers in this class.
Yes,
And
it's such an insane profile too.
it's ridiculous. And still goes out and runs, runs a 4.4, was a 4.3, 4.35, 4.34, 4.39, 4.4, like a, pro day adjusted. But regardless, he has all the tools there that you would want from your primary X receiver. And so that's why, I'm saying it right now. If the Bengals take him, I'm not going to be mad about it. Because I like seeing potent offenses. I like seeing offenses where, you have multiple weapons that can hurt you in multiple ways. And just like, we're mad about Kansas City because if it's not Travis Kelce, it's Tyreek Hill. And if it's not Tyreek Hill, then at least in 2019, it was Damien Williams out of the backfield. There were multiple ways that Kansas City could kill you. And even with Cincinnati and like T. Higgins kind of becoming their star, it's T. Higgins, it's Tyler Boyd, and then it's just bleh. Joe Mixon now is being pushed into the RB1 range, but it's like, can he stay healthy? Will he really get back to the 10+% target share that he was like before he went down? So I like the idea of making your strengths stronger. And if they want to lean on Joe Burrow as a passer, because they really were, he was 45 pass attempts per game.
Yeah, insane.
He was gunning it. So I could see that start to be like, how they want to formulate their offense. So I know the traditionalists and even me, the rational side of me says that you take Sewell and just be done with it. But if they were to take a guy like Jamar Chase, he's one of my favorite guys to watch out of this class. And I think he's the top guy. Other guy that I'm looking at, maybe just again to let my Ohio bias show. It's Justin Fields. Ohio State, I know they don't have a great track record of putting out quarterbacks. I get it. We just watched the Dwayne Haskins experience, fail, and Cardell Jones, and just forget about it. But Justin Fields, he's by far and away one of the better prospects they've had come out of Ohio State in years. If it's not for his average depth of target, it's for his arm strength is through the roof. I know his processing speed isn't really what we want it to be at, but if it's not that, it's his ability to actually move within the pocket. I know that he gets a lot for being a mobile quarterback, but it's actually one of the things that has caused him to take a lot of sacks is because he'll wind up sitting in the pocket longer. And it's a stigma that's I don't want to be perceived as a rushing quarterback. So he'll stay in the pocket longer and he'll get clocked and wind up breaking a couple of ribs in the process. But I think the tools are all there. I really wish that it was him going to San Francisco. I'm still hoping. I'm hoping that that's where it goes. Although the Mac Jones hype train is off the rails at this point. But he's Justin Fields is not one of those guys that, regardless of where he lands at, I know the next best place for Justin Fields, honestly, if it's not going to be San Francisco, if Bill Belichick got his hands on a guy like him, I think that would be an awesome transition to go from Cam Newton to Justin Fields. I think that'd be great. But either way, I think that's another one of the, like, those are my two top guys, like in this class. I mean, to say nothing about the running backs, of course. I mean, it's Najee Harris, and then the guys afterwards. Javonte Williams is starting to pop a bit more, but either way, I mean, it's Jamar Chase, it's Justin Fields, like it's those guys I'm really trying to pay attention to at this point and like see where they go in the draft.
For sure. Yeah, no, we're. I mean, we've had a lot of between Hopper and I, we've had a lot of debates between Fields and Wilson, but those debates stem from because we both love the prospects. We just love the other ones a little bit more.
Yeah.
This feels like generally when you get 5 quarterbacks that are this highly regarded, there's always at least one that I tend to fade more so, and I can't find that. I have to kind of be on the other side of Zach Wilson, but that's because my co-host is absolutely in love with them.
Right, you gotta level me out. You gotta level me out.
I try my best.
Yeah,
to,
that's your job.
But I also love Zach Wilson in the same aspects. It's the same thing for Fields, with him, or Trey Lance for him, where I'm very high on.
Yeah, Trey Lance is Trey Lance is the one that I'm doing more of a balancing act on than Justin Fields, I think.
Yeah, that's true too.
So, because you're higher on, I mean, the love you've shown Lance is greater than Fields. I think Fields, we both generally have the same opinion, and the difference is just Wilson. But
No, that's fair.
as far as, so I've been watching wide receivers this week, so I'm going to give you 2 wide receiver cuts that jumped out for me.
Sure.
One of them is been obvious to everybody else for the rest of the offseason. I'm doing film late. Elijah Moore. I love. I watched him tonight. I love me some Elijah Moore.
You won't beat me on that, love. I promise you right now, you will not surpass me in my imagination.
I mean, first off, the athletic profile is awesome. Like, I don't care that he's 5'9", because the athletic profile is good enough to play outside. But the route running was solid. The depth of his routes was very, very good. Quick cuts, super agile. Catches everything that's anywhere near his vicinity. The only knock that I had on Elijah Moore is that he's 5'9". Other than that, totally okay with it, because he's quick enough and athletic enough, and his routes are good enough to play outside at 5'9", and he's a hell of a mismatch in the slot. So, just super reliable. Like I said, good route runner, great hands, great profile, both from a college productivity standpoint and from an athletic standpoint. There's not a lot there on Elijah Moore for me to not like or for me to hate on. Obviously he's going to sit behind, Jamar Chase and Bateman, but, to me, he's easily in that second tier. The other guy that I like for different reasons is Amon-Ra St. Brown. And it's not because I look at him and think that this guy's ever going to be a consistent wide receiver 1. It's because I look at him and say, well, this guy could regularly be a wide receiver 2, 3, useful type of piece to have on your roster that's not going to demand a high amount of rookie draft capital. Athletic profile wasn't fantastic. You watch his tape, that he's not going to burn guys or make big plays, but he's another guy that had reliable hands. His athletic profile says that he's probably going to be better suited for the slot than he is outside, and I kind of see that on tape too. He plays a little bit of both, but again, just nuanced route runner, good hands, reliable, catches nearly everything that's thrown his way. Not quite Elijah Moore reliable, and just good body positioning. He's a bigger frame at 6'1", so one of few actually bigger receivers in this class. By the way, there's not a ton.
It's pretty skinny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
I blame Rashad Bateman I blame the Gophers for making Bateman seem bigger than what he is.
they did, and then you've
that.
got Smith, who's tall but really thin. So outside of Chase and I guess make an argument for Waddle, St. Brown's really one of the only guys you're looking at, the top that has size to him, and it's unfortunate that he profiles as more of a slot receiver, given his speed and agility scores and everything. But it's also fortunate because if he's utilized in the right way as that possession type of receiver and not the guy that's going to go game break or anything like that. If he's utilized kind of in a way that like Michael Thomas is utilized, for example, not comparing him to Michael Thomas, but that would kind of be the ideal sort of
Big
utilization in the NFL as a bigger
big
slot guy. I
Corey Davis.
really like St. Brown. So we'll see where, he's the type that if his ADP were to, for some reason, skyrocket in rookie drafts, then I'm unfortunately going to hate the ADP. But if he sits in the second round, like I think he's probably going to,
Yeah, he'll be mid.
I'm fine with it.
He'll easily be a mid pick, especially in super flex drafts.
I think
I
so.
won't give too much. Well, I'll just give one more. We're gonna go one a little bit lower on guy that's out of Florida State, so Tamarion Terry. One of my bigger interests because he's such a polarizing, at least in terms of his athletic build compared to what I think his upside could be. Dominant for Florida State, at least his sophomore season. I believe he broke out as a freshman as well. Had to deal with the inept Florida State passing game. The overall environment wasn't strong, and then rumors of him hating the fact that he got redshirted his freshman season, I think, led to that. Obviously, there's a big risk here, but I think given his upside compared to where you're going to be drafting him, likely a third-round pick in Superflex drafts, you really can't go wrong. I think he will. I think he'll sneak in. I think he'll sneak into round 3. Get that day 2 draft capital. He's got the it's got the analytical profile that I think a lot of people like with that early breakout. He is a quote unquote early declare because he's a redshirt junior. He's an older prospect, which sucks, but at least he got the early declare base thrown out of that. He's got the dominator rating from his sophomore season. And I'm keeping my eye on because if he lands in a team like Kansas City to fulfill that outside role to help replace Sammy Watkins, that would be insane because he's 6'2". We're in I think a 4.38. Obviously has the size at 6'2". I think he's 211, 213. So a lot of intrigue there. Obviously, you have drop issues, you have some off the field stuff to it, but put him in an environment that wants to feature him that's not Florida State's horrible passing. I think you can get yourself some really good upside to him.
Speaking of horrible passing, the first game I watched of Elijah Moore, I wanted to run through the screen and strangle their quarterback.
The fucking Matt Carroll. He's so bad. He's so bad. It's not like he's not like Terry. I forgot who it wasn't Blackman, but it was somebody else. It's just anyways.
It wasn't Matt. Yeah, Matt Corral.
Yeah.
Yeah, he pissed me off.
Yeah, he's bad.
Anyway,
All right. Let's get to the homebrew stuff. Let's get to why we brought Chris on. So first question here, bud. What drew you to start homebrewing? What was kind of the allure that wanted you to start homebrewing?
To be honest, the thing that actually nothing drew me to it, and I'll walk you guys through it, because I was playing cards with a buddy of mine, and he said that he had been doing it for a few years prior to us like hanging out, and so I figured I'd try it. It was just like the basic extract kits. Definitely wound up burning a couple because I didn't actually heat up the extract before dumping it in the kettle a couple of times. But it was just one of those things that I would do. And like I wasn't, it's funny that you use that wording because I wasn't drawn to it, right? It's not like I sought it out. It was just something that I started doing. And I wonder if this is the case for other folks that wind up getting into it. It's after you do your first few, first like 3, 4, 5 brews, that's when I really got drawn into it. And that's where I really started thinking about brewing, like thinking about how I could change this process or add in these ingredients. And like, while still trying to understand the process, but it's more about, well, how can I actually, design a new, like this new beer, this new flavor, this thing that I would want to drink. And it wasn't until after I started doing it for, like 9 months, like to a year, and I got, a few brews under my belt, that's when I really got like drawn into the hobby. Because when you first start doing it, and I don't know if this is the case for y'all, but like the first time you're doing it, I mean, you open up that kit, you're reading the directions and you're trying to follow it like to the letter almost. And you're trying to make sure, like, do I have have I sanitized everything? Do I have all this stuff? Is everything at the right temperature? Oh my gosh, it's like 4 degrees off. So like, what do I do now? It's like, you don't really get the enjoyment of home brewing, like on your like very first brew, because you're so worried about getting everything right. You're so worried about not screwing everything up. And so the process kind of overshadows the enjoyment of what you're doing. I mean, you're making alcohol. I mean, it's science, but it's not until you get a bit deeper into it that's when you really get drawn into it. And that's what happened to me. It's like that's when I started getting sucked into it, where I'd be sitting at work. Like I still remember this to this day. I was sitting at work one time, and a friend of mine, she had texted me and said like, "Hey, like I heard you into home brewing. I've always wanted to try it, but I don't like IPAs." Because that was the thing I was brewing, like just left and right. It was like IPAs, because that's what everybody was doing. And it turned me into a beer snob, like for a couple of years. But she was like, well, I don't like IPAs. So like, what else can you make? And I was like, well, shit, what do you like? You know? And she's like, well, I like these. What was it? Who makes the Leinenkugels? Like they're summer shandies that were really popular at the time. And she was like, well, can you make something like that? And I was like, well, yeah. And that's when like the light kind of kicked on. It's like, I really can. I can do this. You know, I can get some grains. I can, try and find some lemon flavoring, or I could get some, I think in some cases, some people just take like lemonade.
Dump lemonade.
Dump a bunch of lemonade mix into it and do it. But it's like, I can figure out how to do this. I can build something. I can create. And that's when I got drawn into it. And that's when it was less about the process and less about freaking out about every single like minute detail, which, don't get me wrong, is still important, but you're not as burdened with all of that. You're not as like freaking out about every single step. So I wasn't really drawn into it until at least probably like almost a year or so after I started doing it, which is where you really start to get a bit more comfortable with the setup, comfortable with the process, and not always freaking out about, I'm not seeing bubbles in the airlock. I need to open it up, right? I need to open it up and, start like, stirring shit up. And like, I was like, no, just, let it sit, let it work, let the yeast do its thing. And so once you start to experience and understand more about, why things happen the way that they happen, and learn some of the ways to troubleshoot things on your own, that's when you can really start to get drawn into it deeper, and you can start to have a bit more fun with it than you typically would if you just like buy like an extract kit, brew it, and say, oh, this was fun, and never touch this stuff again. So that's how it was for me, though.
So it was a little different for me, and I think it's because the starting point's the same, right? I wasn't necessarily drawn to it. I had a buddy that was actually kind of like knew I liked drinking craft beer, and I'd been to a couple of competitions with him and stuff, just to hang out and whatnot. And he was kind of like, hey, when you get a brew, I'll teach you to brew when you're ready. When you get a brew, and so I went and finally hung out with him for one brew. He first off tells me, "What do you want to brew?" So it wasn't, we're gonna brew, I don't know where to start, go find this extract kit. Is what he put it to me right off the bat. Like, what do you want to create? So I told him, and he's like, okay, I've got a recipe. And it was a strawberry vanilla cream ale that first beer I did. And it was, he's like, all right, well, I've got a cream ale recipe that I won't give full disclosure, but may or may not be the recipe from a certain brewery that Dan has had a drink of within the last 10 minutes or so. So yeah, he had that, and then so I got to go brew that, and it was different because we didn't really talk about the nuances or the temperature or gravity or hydrometer readings or anything like that as we were doing it. It was, this is the recipe, this is what the different ingredients are doing for the recipe. Nothing on water chemistry. It was just, here's your water volume. Nothing too much on, it was like, all right, heat it to around this temperature, and that should mash it about the right temperature, and this and that and the other. But it was kind of, in a way, a teaser enough to where it wasn't all the little things I had to worry about, but it was enough to know that those are things that maybe I should be thinking about, which really just immediately spurred that into hyperdrive of, all right, I want to create this. How do I go do it? Let's go look up recipes. Why are people doing this in their recipe? Why are people doing this in their recipe? Oh, well, now I'm seeing even more about, particular mash temps. Okay, what effect does the mash temp have on beer? Let me go buy a book and read it. And then it's like I've been slowly adding in some of those more nuanced things that you worry about and worrying about them a little more, but not like over worrying about them, because I understand that if my mash temp is off by 2 degrees, it's kind of like,
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Or, if I'm, miss a gravity mark by a couple points, it's really not a big deal. That's one thing I swore to myself is I'm not going to worry about BJCP style guidelines or trying to hit numbers.
Oh, yeah. That's
So it was a little different to where I never had that hyperdrive, and I think follow this recipe exactly. And I think it's one because I wasn't doing kits. I got dropped straight into all grain and straight into put a recipe together and see how it turns out. But there was also a lot more that I think helped the allure and the draw to it, because I like to learn. There was a lot more on, okay, now I need to figure out, water chemistry. I need to figure out SRM. I need to figure out, different, how do I build my mash bill, basically. What flavors do different grains impart? Hop schedule, what does that matter? That type of stuff. And had to go actually research that on my own, which once you're in the rabbit hole, you're in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yep.
You guys have any favorite beers from, I guess from earlier on in your process? Something that not what you love now, but is there one beer from, I guess, from the beginning?
It's a great segue into what I'm drinking. If you don't mind me starting.
No, man, go ahead.
Great segue into what I'm drinking right now, actually. So early on, my first beer was good, but I don't really count that because I didn't do it myself, right? It was my hand was held. And then my second beer, I tried to do too much with. The third one was a bottle bomb. So this is beer number 4. And it was spurred by, and I really enjoy this one. I didn't at first. This goes back to patience. But it was spurred by a trip to Arizona. And in that trip to Arizona, we walk into a little spice shop in Old Town Scottsdale. And we buy some teas and some spices. And the guy hears me talking about homebrewing and stuff. And he's like, hey, I don't know what you can do with this, but there's a bar in this area that uses this in cocktails. It'd be cool if you could do this in a beer. And he hands me basically a 2-ounce package of smoked mango tea. It was smoked mango tea. So I'm like, all right, what the hell am I going to do with this? And then I was like, well, mango salsa, let's do a smoked porter. What's something else I can put a twist on? And I'm like, poblano. It's a roasty pepper. Let's use pepper in this beer. Let's use this tea in this beer. And I had intended to do a porter out of it. So we get to brew day. Everything's built out and whatever. And, I'm roasting peppers and, adding them to the boil and then roasting a few more and keeping them in the oven so they stay sanitized so I can drop them in fermentation. And, I'm like, okay, we're going to dry hop it on mango tea and see how that goes. And I'm pouring the grains into the mash tun, and I'm like, oh, holy shit. I forgot to order Black Patent. And I'm already boiling and everything. I've got peppers in the oven. I can't run to the local homebrew store to fix my mistakes. I'm like, well, what the hell do I have? Well, I had some roasted barley sitting in the closet. So instead of darker malts, I threw some roasted barley in here, and we ended up with an amber. So, kind of hard to see on the camera. It looks more black, but we ended up with an amber.
Yeah, there's a tinge. Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it.
And at first, I was like, man, that pepper came off way too strong. And was convinced to not drain pour it, but I'm like, man, that pepper is just overpowering everything. It's too peppery, too peppery, too peppery. But the beautiful part about fruits and vegetables, that flavor dissipates first.
Mm-hmm.
So about 6 months in, the peppers dissipated enough, but the mango tea and everything's still hanging out, to where it actually turned into a really, really good beer. So long way of saying, mistake turned out happy. That's what this beer is. It's the last one I have on it. On the nose, definitely still get a little bit of sweetness out of the mango from the tea, with a little bit of smokiness. One thing that has faded off of this beer is you actually used to get a tinge of the tea on the back end of it as well. That is since faded away, but the sweetness of the mango is still there on the backbone. As I drink it, there's still nice roasted pepper notes up front. Because it's a more of an ale backbone, it drinks, a little bit malty, but also light. Nice roastiness because there's roasted barley thrown into it. The pepper's there, but it's subtle. I've had multiple people have this beer that are saying its praises for something that was a mistake. And out of my early beers, my first 4 to 5, if you will, this one really stands out. And it was a mistake to start.
We're gonna call it the happy mistake if we ever, bottle it. What about you, Chris? What is there? Is there a beer from your early days that really stuck out to you as as one of your favorites?
Yeah, if I can find it. Yeah, it's actually this one right here. So this was a custom label that was made. You can actually see my face on it.
Nice.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so for that brew session, it was actually done at a local brewery, Eudora, here in Dayton, and it was a recipe that I had put together, I think about a year and a half prior to, because like I said, when I first started, it was just like IPAs just out the gate. I had, I think maybe like three or four out of my first 5 kits were just all IPAs. And it was just, oh yeah, like, I'm a home brewer now, so we drink IPAs. It's like this the dumbest thing like ever. But still, it was one of those things that I was just trying to learn the style, trying to learn the process, and let's trying to get as many brews in as possible. But one of the guys I was brewing with that had also been brewing for maybe like 2-3 years like prior to me, he came in with a bottle of who was it made by? I think it was from Chimay, one of their blondes, and I had one of those, and it was just like what is this? Like, this is one of the greatest things I've ever had for in my life. Like, this is just wonderful. I mean, these Belgian beers, these are great. And that was one of the first times that I had been introduced to a separate style where you really do like it. I mean, you guys have probably gone down in that rabbit hole of the Belgian beers. But there's a lot of rigor that goes into those. I mean, from water chemistry all the way down to the yeast. And so for this recipe that I put together for it, I tried to, I didn't really dive into the water chemistry. I haven't gotten that deep into the process yet, but at least from a, hop schedule to the putting the grain bill together, trying to follow as many of the traditional characteristics as possible. And that recipe actually wound up with as close as I could possibly get with the banana notes and whatnot coming out of it. I mean, it was just a wonderful tasting beer. I haven't actually brewed it in probably a year and a half, and I've actually now that I'm talking about it, I want to brew 5 gallons of it now. But it's definitely the reason it stuck out though. It was just one of those game changers for me, where like I was talking about earlier, where you get introduced to a style, you want to stick with that style, but then once you get deeper into the process and once you get more experience, you want to learn more styles. You want to learn about, well, what does it take to make a stout? What does it take to make a porter, amber? I don't mess with lagers, but that's a whole other deal. But it's what are these other styles that are out there, and what does it take in order to create those types of things? And that was one of the first that got introduced to me. So I was like, I have to try this. I have to try and put this together. And I don't know from a competition standpoint if it done well, but at least for me, it was what I was aiming for, when I first had one, because I think I almost like the Pepsi challenge, where we just had a Chimay sitting in front of us and they had mine, and they compared like pretty favorably. And I was like, cool, that's what I want. Like I don't need some gold standard or anything like that. I just want something that is like pleasurable to the, like pleasurable in terms of taste, in terms of aroma, and kind of fits within that realm or style of drinking. And it did. So that was just absolutely what I was aiming for. And so I try and come back to that recipe like every year or so, make some tweaks like if I feel like it. But for the most part, that's been like one of my tried and true recipes for 7-ish years now, somewhere in there. So yeah. It's one of my favorites.
That makes me want. I may go get some Chimay tomorrow when I'm at work.
So,
That style of beer is just one of those that's just like, I don't know how
It'll never change. Like,
yeah,
you can
it'll
always
never
go back to it.
Yeah, you can always go back to it.
Yeah, so it's like, you know what, I've fucked with the fruited Berliners, and I've fucked with the massive haze bombs. I want to go back. It's a trend in beer that we're seeing now, where it's like, as a whole, it's being just shifted to more of the, of the classic German style beer.
And it's a beautiful thing, because here's the thing. Those are the people think like, well, this triple dry hopped IPA was probably really hard to do. No, you're masking deficiencies by throwing a shit ton of hops in
Yep.
for aroma. Or people think that, well, these sours that are taking everything by storm is hard to do. Well, maybe a little bit. Half the adjuncts you're adding don't actually do a damn thing because they're fermenting out. But like cream cheese. But at the same time, you're masking any deficiencies in the beer because you're throwing so many damn adjuncts in there that you can screw up the grain bill and it's fine.
Right.
But with those classic styles of German beers, like you mentioned, Chris, you have to be so anal retentive kind of about your temperatures, about your yeast strains, about your mash bill, about, deconcocting, things like that, because you have to have the mash bill right. You have to hit those marks because you're trying to generate certain chemicals at certain parts in the brew to give certain flavors. Like, you drink a Hefeweizen and you taste banana and clove, it's not because they added banana and clove to the damn beer. It's because there are two chemical compounds generated when you're making that beer that you have to try to make happen. Like, it's 100% chemistry. For sours, you've got to try to get, which there's some additives in that, but you got to try to get your acid content right. Otherwise, you're going to be, like, lip pucker and sucking on a warhead, or it's not going to be there at all. And those classic styles of beer, people don't realize how much goes into those and how much harder those are than your I've got 9,000 adjuncts in me type of IPA, because of what you have to get right in your temperatures, because of what you have to get right with the chemical compounds that you're generating, because of what you have to get right in your fermentation temperatures and your yeast strain and how active that yeast is and your carbonation, and every little thing that you do will change the character of that beer because it doesn't have anything to hide behind.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm about to go pick up some grains tomorrow, actually, and if it doesn't rain on Saturday, I'll probably wind up brewing. But I am trying to put together one of my favorite beers for the spring/summertime, which is like it's a hazy, it's a hazy NEPA. Love making those, because especially in the spring, springtime. But yeah, I mean, it calls for, I think I've got like 12 ounces of hops going into this thing.
Yeah.
So if I want to, I mean, I can take a hit in efficiency, but you'll never notice it.
Right, because you got 12 ounces of hops going into a 5-gallon batch.
Yeah. I mean, if I wind up, I could just dry hop the shit out of it, and like, you'll never know.
Yeah.
But with those beers, I mean, it's funny how, if you were to compare grain bill for something like like a Belgian blonde, like something like that, and compare that to like a hazy, a NEPA, like whatever, I mean, you would look at the grain bill for a blonde and just be like, well, that's it.
Yeah.
But no, it's like, but the nuances, like, you won't see that on the paper.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how important is it for you to hit those targets that are on there, and why you have the grain bill set up the way that it is? Like that doesn't come off like if you were to walk down to the homebrew store and say like, "Yep, these are these are the grains that I need in order to make this blonde," and they'll give you that stuff. But then you could wind up being completely off from the flavor profile that you're
Right,
looking for.
because like the cream ale, for example, is 2-row, which is, for those who don't know, 2-row is one of the two most common types of barley that's used, 2-row and a Maris Otter.
Yep.
But it's 2-row and flaked maize, basically, is all that goes into a cream ale. But you can screw that beer up easy. And if you're looking at an IPA, you're going to have 2-row or Maris Otter. You're going to have something in there to help add a little bit of body to it, something in there to help add a little bit of malt backbone to it, to help those hops stand up to where it's not just bitter and floral. For New England's, I think, I don't know what your recipe is specifically, but oats are typically in there because of protein content to actually hold the haze and hold things in suspension. But you don't have to be as nuanced in the other processes, as you were saying. So just wanted to give a little perspective on what those grain bills are, because like a cream ale, or I've got a Weiss ale in the closet right now fermenting. Grain bill on that one's easy. There's 3 grains. It's wheat. It's wheat, Maris Otter, and a little bit of melanoidin. That's it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But New England, a NEPA, you got a more complicated grain bill, but you can hide it. Same thing with like hop schedule. Hop schedule is going to be way more complicated on that one. It is going to matter a lot to the character of that beer.
Yeah.
But you got 12 ounce. If you're dry hopping it with a shitload of stuff, you're not going to know if you screwed up a 20-minute hop addition.
No, not at all. Because you're going to get popped with that. Because see, what have I got going in this? I've got Citra Lemon Drop, Galaxy, and Mosaic, I think, was the 4th one. You're not going to notice it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, and Dan, what are you going to pick about it? You're going to pick up a shitload of citrus notes and maybe some bitter to balance it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're not necessarily going to know, well, you should have added the Citra 10 minutes earlier or anything like that. So,
yeah.
All right, so that's a great segue. Oops, sorry. Does anyone else have any?
No, I was going to segue a little bit into the recipe question, but I'll let you take it. It's a lot more fun to sit on the other side of this. You're the host. Go.
All right. So we talked about recipe. You guys have mentioned from early on to what you're doing now. What process do you use when you're crafting a new recipe? And what have you learned or what have you tweaked since right now from when you first started? And we'll start with Chris.
We're both Chris.
I'll say which Chris.
God damn it, you're right. We'll start with whoever wants to talk about it first.
I'll tell you what. Let me start with kind of my process.
You're still new to it,
yeah. Let me start with my process for crafting a new recipe that I'm really interested for Chris's kind of process and evaluating that recipe and then tweaking. Also, his process for crafting, but I really want to give him a lot of floor time on the. Okay, this was my starting point. Now, how do I make it better? Because, I'm just now, year and a half into it, I'm just now rebrewing some things and trying to tweak some things to make them better. Because you get through that initial burst, right, where it's like, I want to do this and this and this. So you brew 12 things one time, and now it's like, all right, this could have been better. How do I make it better? But for me, all my recipes start with an idea. They start with, I want to do this, and they're inspired by something. It could be something as simple as my dad drinking a Schnickel Fritz from UCBC and saying, hey, can you do something like this? Hence why there's a Weiss ale in my closet. Or it could be something is, it's about to be summer, I haven't brewed an IPA yet, let me do a session IPA. Or it could be something as simple as, man, I like peach cobbler. These are the flavors I like. Let's try to bring that out in a cream ale, which is a recipe I've got sitting there waiting for me. And then what I'll typically do is I'll leverage people that have done it. So I'll typically go out and Google various recipes. There's all sorts of resources out there. And what I'll do is I'll compile 6 or 7 different recipes that are kind of in the area of what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to dissect those recipes and I'm going to reverse engineer it. And I'm going to try to figure out why did they do certain things. And it's going to be, why did they build the grain bill in the way that they built the grain bill? Why did they do the hop additions in the way that they did the hop additions? What flavors are they getting out of those grains? What aromas are they getting out of those hops? What adjuncts did they add? When did they add them? Did they dry hop? Did they flame out? Did they first wort? Did they dip? Did they, add adjuncts in at the boil? Did they do it in secondary? Did they do it at bottling? And really kind of see consistencies. And what I'm looking for there is I'm looking for, how did you get the flavors out of this beer that are key to this beer? And I'm really looking for ratio as well. Particularly, what's your total weight of grain? Because that's going to directly impact. And what are your percentages as far as what you're adding in there? From there, I'm going to take that, I'm going to break it down, and I'm ultimately going to decide, well, I like this from this recipe, I like this from this recipe, I liked that they did this, I didn't like that they did this, and I'm going to combine all that into some concoction of, okay, I think I want to do mine this way. And that's going to be based on, again, just what I find from reverse engineering their stuff. What grains do I want to put into it? Typically, as I break their stuff down, I'll decide, base is base for a reason, so I'll figure out what my base malt's going to be, and then I'll build out my grain bill from there. And then we'll figure out hops based on, bittering versus aromatics, and figure out where I want to add them in, how much do I want to bring out, because that's really, for our listeners, that's the difference in your hop schedule. The later you add something in the boil, the more aroma you get off of it. The earlier you add something in the boil, the less aroma you get, the more bittering quality and kind of flavor qualities get added to it. So from there, it then gets plugged into these calculators online that are going to tell me what the ABV is going to be, what the SRM is going to be, what the IBUs are going to be. I said BJCP guidelines be damned. I don't want to brew a blonde ale that's red, for example. So, you got to be, it's kind of a sanity check there. Or I don't want to brew a session that's going to turn out to be 11%.
Right. Right.
Because you're doing something with a certain idea in mind. You're brewing a session, you're not brewing it to be an imperial. So, I'll plug that type of stuff in just to make sure that the numbers are in the general area of where I want them.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll write it down, figure out what my temps are going to be, and boom, recipe's crafted. And that's really 90% of the work. Brewing isn't the hard part. Crafting is the hard part.
No, I agree. And I think that's definitely a fair process. And I go about it in a fairly similar style. I think the one thing, though, I think that I've changed over the last few years is that I'll definitely take the reverse engineering route, but I almost start from a sense of I look at from two things. One, what do I want my beer to look like? Because I've done a few competitions over the last few years. And it's almost like it's one of those things where I've heard it being said that we eat with our eyes. If something looks pleasing, like if a beer looks great, it's got a clear beer with a thick head or something like that, people gravitate towards because it looks great, depending on what your favorite style is. But so that's one thing that comes to mind is that what do I want my beer to look like? So if I'm in the mood for a hazy beer, okay, well then now we know how do you get a hazy beer? Like what are you looking for in terms of a grain bill? You got your flaked oats. You might have a little bit of two-row if you want to throw in some, Crystal 20, Crystal 40 in order to change what the overall SRM is going to be. Then cool, whatever the case may be. But at least from a baseline, if I know what I want the beer to look like, that at least helps me form an idea of what that grain bill is going to look like. The second part is then going to be the flavor. Like, am I looking for a bitter beer? If I'm really looking for that IPA type of bitterness, or am I looking for a juice bomb? Am I going for another hazy? Do I just not even really care? Am I looking for more of like a dessert beer? So like I was talking about the blonde, am I looking to try and hit those, banana like type notes? So if I can get some ideas on those two aspects, what it's going to look like, what it's going to taste like, then I can start to kind of file that into a category, because I'm 100% with you, Chris. Those BJCP guidelines, my gosh, I've been dinged like so much for trying to because I'll go off the rails when I'm trying to even like enter a beer into a competition. And I'll be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is an IPA. Like, well, this has a like really malty backbone, really malty backbone. Well, I was trying to go for this at the same time, so I just like some of the stuff went right out the window. Well, we're going to give you a 25 out of 50. All right, fine. Screw you guys. I hate you. But it's just one of those things. Like you wind up getting dinged for just trying to make what you like. See, and that's beautiful right there. And that's exactly that's that's actually that's exactly. I mean, you look at that and see that's what you want to brew. So you see that, and you want to try and back or reverse engineer what that looks like. How would you make that? What do you need in order to do that? And so like that, I think I saw a similar picture. Oh, what is it? It's not called Treehouse Brewery.
Yeah.
They have.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Treehouse.
Yep.
Yeah, the Orange Julius.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That whole Sorry.
Yeah. But like I saw a picture of that on Twitter one time, and I was like, "What the hell is that? And how do I make it?" And they were like, and I just remember seeing a picture of it, and I was like, "I want that." So like that's where it was. What is it? What does it taste like? What does it look like? How do I make something do that? And so if I know that, and I can kind of work my way back into it, then that's how I'll wind up coming up with a recipe. But then I'm very, very similar to you, Chris. If I at least have an idea of what the grain bill is going to look like, what the hop schedule is going to look like in order to get me to what the beer is going to look like, what it's going to taste like, and then I start doing my Google searches, going through the the Homebrew Association forums.
Yeah.
Yep. Go through those forums, see what people have done to kind of tweak things, what their process has been, adjust hop schedules as needed, maybe make my own additions. Trying to, because I'll go ahead and tack on maybe a quarter pound of 2-row, maybe add a little bit more in terms of carapils if I want to, just because I know I'm going to like lose a little bit in efficiency. I can adjust for that on my own. It's just like little tweaks here and there that once you get into it, you understand like where your losses are going to be in your process. But then you still wind up with a product that matches what you wanted at the start, what it looks like, what it tastes like, what you're aiming for, and that from that perspective, then it becomes much easier to be satisfied with the product because that's what you wanted. I mean, you do the research, you find out how you can create that thing that you're trying to create, and then you wind up with something that looks like that. And now I want to go brew because that looks delicious, man.
That is. I wish I could take credit for that. That's not mine. That's Brent's. Dan knows Brent. That's his. I'm doing. Yeah. So I have that. I don't just keep pictures of his beer around randomly. So they were before COVID hit. We're gonna open a brewery, Havana, Illinois. So. Central Illinois, basically. We're about to open one, and I was working on their website for them, so I had pictures of... I don't have pictures of my beers, but I had pictures of their beers hanging around and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then COVID happened, and everything froze or whatever, but I'm like, yeah, that's Talk to Me Goose. That is it is good. It's real good. But
it looks good.
Yeah,
I want it.
That's the guy that got me into homebrewing. So when I told you I had a friend that kept asking me when you're going to brew, it was that guy, and he actually gave me an all grain setup, his old kettle, mash tun that somebody else had flaked on,
nice.
burner, everything I needed to get started. So, which is not, as you know, I mean, it's a couple $100 investment. So,
for sure, yeah. I just switched to an electric system a couple of years ago. I don't know if I can, without messing up my camera, but you can see like my mash and boil sitting down there, which has been a wonderful investment. Since I could literally brew in my office if I want to during the wintertime, which is great.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, like you said, I mean, you learn about it, you get invested, you get drawn into it, and so then you start adding things as you go along. Yeah. Adding in, I mean, just additional tools, additional equipment, and you're to the point where you wind up just having everything.
Yeah. No, I just like I upgraded a kettle. We're gonna get some temperature control for fermentation in this year and all sorts of stuff. So, one thing in recipe crafting I wanted to ask you about, because again, hop schedules in most beers are easy. Hop schedules in IPAs are a little bit different. I just brewed my first session, and as I tried it the other day, I'm about to revisit it. But as I tried it the other day, I'm like, man, this probably needs some adjustments. I think it needs more hops. I think it needs kind of a schedule addition. So, I guess for me, go ahead, if you will, and discuss like when you're building out your hop schedule, what are you looking for? Is you put it together? Kind of what's your thought process as you're building? Is it just fuck it, I'm gonna throw these at the front end, and I want a boatload of citra to come out, so I'm gonna throw that in a dry hop or a 5 minute. I mean, how do you structure that?
Three things. So overall aroma, which I mean, that's pretty much controlled like what you put in at the back end. But also that initial hit, like once it hits your tongue, like are you going for that bitterness? Do you just want the maltiness of the beer and stuff to really like carry the load? So that's where if I want something that's going to just hit you in the tongue the moment that the moment it hits your lips, then sure, I might put in my additions a little bit earlier. So if we're talking 60-minute boil, I might lean towards adding something in maybe quarter to a half ounce at about the 45-minute mark. I don't typically do like something at 60 minutes anymore. That's just personal preference. But I will lean more towards like having something be like an earlier addition if I want that to be just the thing that you taste like immediately after you immediately once you put it to your lips. But also the other part being the aroma portion. So if I do want the, let's say, like earthy tones of like a let's see, maybe even like a Simcoe or like a Cascade or something like that to be a part of the beer, then I might be looking at something around a 20 to 30-minute addition. So that again, that's again something that before it even hits your lips, you put your nose in the cup, and it's like, oh, it's like it's hitting you like right in the face, and that's a part of it as well. So it's just really about on a per case basis, like how I want that beer to be perceived, like as the person's drinking it. I mean, if it's something up front that I want them to have, something that's more on the back end that you want them to taste, that's where then I start to put together a hop schedule of, all right, well, this is the flavor profile that I'm really trying to look for. Of course, trying to keep that in balance with the grains itself, but from a hops perspective, I mean, that's really what I'm trying to go for. Like for this this NEPA that I'm going to be doing over the weekend, I really want that to be one of those juice bombs. Like that's what I'm going for. So that's where I'm trying to hit it with probably, I would say 4 ounces or so between the boil and flame out. But then I want to hit it with the remaining 5, 6, 7 ounces of dry hop like afterwards, because I want that to be just like that thing that, I mean, doesn't matter like how much like what the grain is. I don't want the grains to be a part of it at all. I want these hops to hit you like the second that it hits your lips. So for that one I would, but if it's that blonde that I was talking about earlier, then sure, you're going to be a little bit more delicate with your hop additions, because you don't want that to really carry the beer itself. So it just comes down to the style and I guess what you're going for from a flavor perspective.
Awesome. And yeah, I just poured it. Okay. This is only my second time drinking this.
Ooh,
beer.
that looks good.
Is that the same one, or is that a different
No,
one?
this is the session that I just did. So
The session. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we got a listener question we're gonna just quickly pivot to. It's about football. So I want to say Lucian.
that's how I pronounced it. So that's what we're going with.
We're gonna go with you can go with that. They want to know who's our most underrated rookie prospect. So just give one name. He's just one guy that you think is flying underneath the radar in terms of prospect?
Me first, or you guys want to go first?
You can go first, man. You're the guest.
Okay. I'm kind of digging. I might mispronounce his first name, Tamarian. I don't mind. Like I know he's probably going to wind up being. I hope he doesn't go undrafted, but at the very least, I think he's going to wind up being a day 3 pick. But I'm looking at it from a dynasty perspective. If there's one guy that I think if I'm going to try and swing for the upside for like a third, for like a third round pick, I think he has some of the tools that would at least get you there, depending on where he winds up.
Yeah,
like draft capital behind him and all that. But I do think he's one of those intriguing prospects that's like towards the back end of this draft.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Terry. I still think there's a chance he goes day 2 just because of his measurables.
I hope so.
His athletic upside it's insane.
That's the thing that stuck out to me. It's just like, man, like I know he's probably going to wind up being towards the back end of this class because it's more front loaded. But if he's one of those guys that winds up like a team winds up seeing him, like he winds up getting that day 2 draft capital, then all right, now we're really talking. So he's one of those guys I'm kind of gunning for in like the 3rd round at this point.
Yeah, and he's going to be so like he's at the point where we're just taking upside shots in round 3 beyond. So,
yep.
What about you, Hopper? I know there's one in the chat that you mentioned, but why don't you go ahead and talk about it?
Yeah, and one I talked about earlier on the show, too, so I'm going to pivot. I mentioned St. Brown earlier, who I don't know how under the radar he is, but he's not overhyped, which is essentially under the radar these days.
Yeah.
The other one that I think is flying a little low right now is Kylan Hill.
Yeah.
And big fan of Kylan Hill, especially landing spot's going to matter for him, but it's more so what can he do in the open field. So 4.62 on the 40 was a little disappointing, but his game speed and his burst seemed to be a bit better than that. He on film is explosive, good acceleration, good speed, good agility. Was decent in pass protection, which should help him get on the field. Very pass catching adept. And he checks in at 5'11", 215. So we've talked about bigger satellite backs kind of in the past. And if Kylan Hill lands in a role like that, like say Arizona, who needs some running back depth, for example, that's a role that I really, really like for him. And this is a draft class where all of your running backs outside of Etienne, Williams, and Najee Harris, and if you're Dan Kenneth Gainwell, are going to be flying under the radar because it's perceived as a thin class. So, I mean, you're going to draft running backs, so you've got to figure out who do I need to try to take a swing on. And a guy that I like production profile as well is Kylan Hill. He also does decent as a downhill runner, and I think has a pretty good vision from what I saw on film. So, again, athletic metrics were a little disappointing, but overall, I like what I saw from him.
And mine is, I got to mention in the chat, but I mentioned Amari Rogers. From an athletic profile, or from an analytical profile, you hope for more. You can kind of explain it away. Obviously, he had to compete with T Higgins, with Justin Ross. Guys, highly caliber, highly touted guys coming out. Ross pre-injury was with Lawrence as the next, freshman wide receiver phenom. But for Rodgers, is really more so just what his size and what he put on his total overall profile. He's one of the bigger wide receivers in this draft class. I think he's a 5'9", 2'0". I got it sitting here, 5'9", 211. So he's built. He's thick. It's been talks of him maybe taking more snaps out of the backfield, and at least given his size, you can profile to that way. But when you watch the Clemson tape, when you watch his film this year, you can see that he's used both inside and outside. And just given his athletic build, there's a lot of potential upside to that. On top of the fact that he had 68 punt returns. You don't put the ball into that guy's hands on that high caliber of a team for him not to be good in the open field. So while his production profile isn't great, there's a lot of upside intrigue, and just like with the prospects that we both talked about, these two guys are, these three players you can get in the third round of your rookie drafts, especially super flex, and not have to spend the higher rookie draft capital, to get them. So when you're in those third rounds, those late second to third rounds and beyond, you're shooting for upside, not just for floor. So guys like that will stick out. I agree with, with both your guys' picks. So we're going to pivot off the football. We're going to go back to talking beer. I got to ask you guys, what are your favorite beers to make? I know there's been a lot of IPA talk, but when it comes down to it, is it still IPAs? You guys, is there maybe something else that you guys just are my favorite to make?
So that's interesting, just in the sense that, again, brew day is kind of, when you say make, I think of the act of actually making. And brew day is, at least for me, brew day is more about, it's more fun in groups. It's more about hanging out with people. It's more about drinking with people and sharing with people, because 95% of the work comes in crafting the recipe. That being said, I don't have a specific answer. I would just say that anything with a degree of difficulty outside of the grain bill, because the grain bill, when you mash in, you mash in. There's not really a whole lot of complexities that go into mashing in. It's your grain bed is there and your water goes on top of it. You mash in. IPAs are probably the most fun to brew because of your hop additions, because you're more active. Some of those, because of some of the stuff that you have to do during the mash process. Some of those more traditional, German style beers are a little bit more fun to do because you're more involved during the actual brew day, because there's more going on. So that's kind of my non-answer as far as what's the most fun to brew, because the brewing process in itself is not where most of the activity happens.
Okay, so let's go with this. You've made what, 4 or 5 different homebrews, Hopper?
Me? We're closer to 13 or 14 now.
Okay, what's been your favorite one out of the if you're there's what's one that you've had the most enjoyment making in terms of nerding out and from recipe building to the actual involvement of making the beer? Which one?
It was the second beer I ever did, and you got fucking shit canned off a half a bottle of it, but the flavor was actually really good. I think it ended up probably at 11%, 12, somewhere in there, because all the sugars that were in it. I tried to do a caramel apple ale type of beer.
That one was good.
You had that one, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
so it was strong though. So
It was.
that one was everything from I'm slicing apples and putting them in the boil to I'm actually taking a portion of the wort and caramelizing it before I put it back into the boil to get some natural caramel flavor out of it, which just created more sugar, which made it really high in ABV content.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did get a caramel flavor off of it, though. I don't think it was completely for naught, because you got some of that burnt sugar type flavors off of it. But
it was there.
I'm caramelizing wort, and then when it comes time to, in secondary, we've got some cinnamon sticks going in for a baked apple type thing, and then bottling it. There's actually cider that went into it to add even more apple flavor, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But all of the different steps that went into that was actually pretty fun, because you just felt a little bit like a mad scientist, caramelizing wort and tossing fruit in at the boil and everything like that. It was just so super freaking involved that it was constant activity and it was fun.
What about for you, Chris?
I would say my favorite, I don't know, again, if it's not a style per se, but my favorite beer to make is actually my pumpkin beer that I make around the October timeframe, because kind of like what Chris was outlining, when I make it, I actually use legit pumpkin, throw it in the oven with some brown sugar on top of it, scoop that in, and that goes into the boil. So I love doing it. I think I've done it for the past 4 years straight. But it is like one of those where you're moving like start to finish. I mean, the recipe itself, like I've been tweaking for, but yeah, about the last like 5-6 years. But it's definitely one of those that like I look forward to doing it like each year because it's so fun to make because you're just like, all right, I'm taking like actual pumpkin, like I'm putting it in here and like, adding all these things and like, doing these extra things that you typically wouldn't do like with a traditional style beer. And so that's where I find that the challenge in creating something like that to be a bit, it's a good thing to do, especially around that time of year, and like to have something like that on hand. I think is it's much more fun than any of the other stuff that I would typically brew throughout the year.
You're gonna bring some of that to the expo.
I'll have some beer on hand for sure. I don't know if
I know it's a bit early for I'm so used to as someone who
Oh.
works in the beer department. I'm so used to seeing
I'll have some things
and pumpkins in August. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'll have some things. I'll have some things on hand for that since you're going to be there. I'll bring some shit with me.
I think the last one when I went, not last year obviously, but the year prior, when I was there, I had 3 growlers, 4 growlers in a backpack, and I just like a few folks. I was like, here, got some beer for you. Take it.
We're gonna have a damn beer fueled mega hangout episode with everybody that's there. I'm gonna have to get a suite again, Dan.
we might reach out to you, Chris. We might have we might talk about doing some fun nerd out stuff when we're all out there.
Oh heck yeah, man!
In
And I want to
August,
go
man,
back
for
over to get over to Fathead.
Yeah, that's
and,
good stuff.
And yeah, they know that they've got some pretty good brews.
Yeah,
I enjoyed their pumpkin. I remember them having an imperial pumpkin. It was like 10%, and I love. If I'm drinking pumpkin beers, I want them super boozy. So.
Oh yeah.
By the way,
I think min 8% for pumpkin beers.
That's about right where it needs to be.
I don't know if it was because I had one hell of a sinus infection the last time I drank this beer, or if it's because the difference week 1 to week 2. But damn, is it better than the first time I had it?
All right, so we talked about our favorite beers. We talked about crafting recipes. We got a little 2-parter here. We're almost wrapped up here. I don't want to take up too much more of your time here, Chris. But what is the most, I guess in your mind, what is the most crucial part when it comes to making a good homebrew? And then during your guys' times of making these beers, what has been kind of the more difficult aspects to grasp?
I don't know about you, Chris, but I would say the thing that took me the longest time to grasp were the temperature targets that you need to hit, like for your mash. It's not just the fact that like each recipe they'll tell you, for the most part they'll tell you like what you need, what your mash or your mashing temperature is supposed to be at, like, and all that good stuff. But for me, like when I was first starting out, it was trying to understand the why. Like, why does it need to be at like 152? Like,
right.
What's the purpose? And then of course that's where you hop down that rabbit hole of like what's happening to your grains.
Yeah, and the simple answer is science for those that are interested.
For folks that don't care,
it has to do. It's starch conversions and how easy that is to break down, and it makes a big difference in how full versus thin your beer is, and and your conversion and your efficiency and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, trying to extract those sugars so that you're actually hitting your gravity targets. I mean, that's where all that stuff happens. But for me, starting off, it's like, okay, so so I have to have it at 152. All right, but what if it's at 153? All right, so what am I supposed to do now? So does it have to be? Do I now need to like cool it down to 1? I mean, so those are the things where it was difficult for me to try and suss out, like what really needs to happen in order for me to hit my targets and to get to the flavor profile or even to like the gravity targets that I'm looking for. And it doesn't take too long after that.
And you're on electric, so you got it a little easy because you have temperature control. But when you're doing it like I am, and you still got the converted like igloo cooler. You ain't keeping it at a damn temperature. You're shooting like 2 degrees over target, and then 2 to 5 degrees over target, and then you're hoping your average temperature is somewhere in the area where you wanted it.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm definitely with you. And so that's where if you want to crawl down that rabbit hole and get into the science, And it's actually the same thing on the temperature side of things with yeast.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the thing. The rule is like, if it's under 75 degrees or less, okay, you're probably fine, and you're not going to wind up completely missing your target. But then if you want to dive into what type of flavor profiles you're going to get from your yeast, then now, you're really diving into that next level of nuance when it comes to home brewing.
Yeah.
Where I would just be just as fine taking my bucket, pitching my little pack of SO4, SO5,
Right.
throwing it into my closet, and I'll come back in a week.
Right. And SO4 and SO5 are nice because they ferment well at room temperature. Yeast companies are at least nice in the fact that most of them will, one, do a good job of spelling out what esters you're going to get. Two, telling you what the optimal fermentation temperature range is for their yeast. And three, typically giving you a percentage of flocculation and attenuation. So they give you a little more info than at least. But if you're asking yourself what flocculation or attenuation are, that's half the fun with yeast
Exactly.
and trying to figure out that
where
shit.
is it? Actually, I got. For anybody that really wants to go down that rabbit hole, go and get you this book right here. That is as deep down the rabbit hole as like you want to go.
Or you meet yourself a guy with a doctorate in yeast.
Yeah, that also helps too.
Which, lucky enough to have met that guy, but Wilderness Trail, Dr. Pat Highest. But anyway.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
you can. There are whole. I've sat in on conversations that have lasted 45 minutes to an hour between. These are like high level, like before you go pro, like home brewers, just
Right.
talking about yeast.
Yep. Because it is a major component to yeast. Like, you don't realize it, but I'll go back to Hefeweizen, for example. Other than the chemicals that are put off at your different temperature targets, because science, yeast, major part for some of those banana notes and everything. Yeast,
Right.
major part for some of those fruity esters. If you've ever had a Saison, that little tinge that you get off of them, that's entirely yeast.
Is it all yeast?
That is entirely yeast, that little tinge you get.
I want to say on Dupont.
So, I'll take it a little different. I agree on, first off, I don't disagree with what you said on yeast or on temperatures, because temperatures are a hard thing to wrap your head around about, and you're going to Google it like 19 times still on remembering of, okay, is it, if I go, is it lower or higher that I go for a fuller bodied beer, or, that type of stuff. The most difficult thing, which may or may not be the most difficult thing because I haven't attacked it yet, water chemistry intimidates the shit out of me. And varying opinions on how much it matters, and depending on where you are, it varies what you actually need to do water chemistry-wise. If you live in St. Louis City proper, where Anheuser-Busch paid for the water system, which we learned 3 episodes ago on this show. Stompy. You don't have anything to do because Anheuser-Busch paid for it. It's pretty well neutral. If you live in a place like I do, just outside of that, where the water is a little bit hard, then it's going to be better for certain types of darker beers. And for lighter beers, you may have to treat it. And that, like, learning how to filter and treat and do that with water is something that's intimidated the hell out of me. So if I'm going to pivot to something that I actually have done that was, to me, mildly intimidating, it's proper carbonation and volume of CO2 is, especially for different beer styles. So, Dan's heard me mention, guys heard me mention bottle bombs earlier on the show. So first off, to understand why it's difficult, you have to understand the different ways that you can carbonate. You can force carbonate if you're kegging, or I'm not kegging yet because I moved out of an apartment in October and I didn't have any real estate to do kegging. You bottle condition. And the trick with bottle conditioning is, we're going to get sciencey here for a minute, is you add priming sugar at the bottling because there's still yeast that's in your beer and is still active in your beer that will then take that sugar while it's in the bottle and convert that into alcohol. But as a byproduct, you get CO2, and then because your bottles are oxygen locked with the cap and barrier locked, that CO2 reinfuses into the beer and therefore carbonates it. Problem is, different beers, different types of carbonation, different levels of sugar that need to be added. Your temperature that you're bottle conditioning at has a major impact on, how much carbonation you're going to get. You get too carbonated, you have bottles exploding, and foam ups and all sorts of shit. You undercarbonate, then it's going to taste flat. But then the amount of carbonation that's proper for your beer varies on style to style. Again, BJC be damned, but if you overcarbonate a stout, for example, you're going to know.
Oh, yeah.
Versus if you undercarbonate an ale, you're going to know. So, it's kind of just, and the other part of it is, depending on what you're using for priming sugar, ferments differently and varies on the amount that you need to use. If you're using table sugar, it's not going to be the same if you're using brown sugar, if you're using corn syrup, whatever. So a lot of that kind of goes away when you get into kegging, because then you just set your regulator for this is the PSI and the level of infusion I want, and you're good. But if you're bottle conditioning when you're first starting out, there's a not exact science and trick to actually getting that shit right, which is the number one reason that I've had beers screwed up. I haven't had a problem with infections. I haven't had a problem really with recipe building. I have had problems with carbonation, overcarbed, undercarbed, bottle bombs, shit like that. So just, that's my answer on it.
Yep, I agree. I mean, the water chemistry thing, that's actually probably the best answer, because I haven't even stepped into that realm. In my area, we do have hard water, so I just wound up saying, screw it. I got an RO system.
Yep.
And that's what I do. I mean, have I gone into, I think in a cup, I think it was for a competition or something like that a couple of years ago that I was doing, I wound up getting what did I wind up adding? Like some gypsum and maybe like a couple other additives in order to get the water profile I was looking for. That's because but the only reason I did that is because I had the exact amount that I needed to add in order to, it's more or less just following a recipe. But other than that, could I create a water chemistry profile in order to match a style? No. I've looked into, just like we were talking earlier about the Belgian style. No. They have because for most of them, traditionally they were using the wells that were at the abbeys that most of the monks were brewing at. So trying to recreate that is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
But for my purposes, I figured if I at least have as close to neutral water as possible, and I'm going to wind up taking a hit on efficiency from that anyway, as long as I'm not completely going off the rails and adding either additives or something like that, or my adjuncts are completely off, or whatever, then I can at least start off with just some neutral water and take it from there. Neutral water, spring water, something like that, and go from there. But yeah, that is one of the, at least for me, it's uncharted territory, and something that I've been debating for about a year or so ago on if I really want to start diving into that.
Yeah.
That's where you get into the real chemistry about it.
Yeah, and that's something I did at the beginning of this year, because I'm sitting there all right, I'm a little insight into how my brain works. The beginning of every year, I set goals, and I set them for different areas. There's goals for this podcast that definitely aren't related to listener count or anything. There's goals to, what I'm doing with Bourbon Society. There's goals to what I do with Homebrew. And the three things I looked at were, do I want to focus more on temperature control in all aspects of the brew? Do I want to get to kegging, or do I want to look at water chemistry? We went temperature for this year, but water chemistry is on the horizon eventually. But like you said, RO system, which is basically a whole house Brita filter, for those that don't know, it is a little bit of an investment. But then, like you said, gypsum and all the different additives that you add to change the different pH levels and everything in your water. And it's not the same for every beer, which is even harder. It's not just okay, I know my water, so I got to add X, Y, and Z for every style of beer to get it neutral. No, when you really start getting into water chemistry, different chemistries of water are better for different types of beers. So you're treating your water differently every damn time. You get it to a neutral starting point, and then you treat it. And it's involved, and you've got to be a damn chemist to, I think, really understand everything you're doing instead of just,
Yeah.
it says that this much. It says that this much.
Calculators that can
Yeah.
at least get you on the right path nowadays.
they
but
do.
It's like, do you want to put in? It's again like how far down the rabbit hole
Right.
do you want to
Do
go?
you just want to take what the calculator tells you and not understand why it's telling you that, or do you want to understand why it's telling you that? And if you want to understand why it's telling you that, hopefully you got a couple hours to study.
Yeah. So if you're not a fan of chemistry, then just buy 6-7 gallons of spring water at your local supermarket, and then
Right, it's going to
use
be
that.
like $8. You use that, and it's already purified. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you just say screw it and go with whatever comes out of the faucet, and as long as there's
I
not,
did that for a few years.
as long as there's not super off flavors, you're okay.
Yeah.
Is there a massive difference to using? Like, I know, I mean, without having to jump too much into the chemistry of it, but is there? I haven't really thought about it, but is there a true noticeable difference when you use, let's say, just tap water as opposed to trying to get to the more purified, I guess, neutral balance?
So let me flip that around on you, Dan. You've drinking various bottled waters and stuff in your life, right?
Yeah.
Is there a noticeable difference between Aquafina and Smart Water, or between water that came out of a Brita filter versus water that came straight out of the tap, or between like distilled water from the store and Dasani? And I'm not saying that to be a smart ass.
No. Of course not. Taste wise, yes.
Yeah.
I which is
Yes.
I guess it's me asking a question. It's
yeah. It's
I can notice the taste difference from my tap to
yes,
bottled.
and you can in beer too.
Yeah.
If like I said, I have harder water. So if you're really looking for, like, the back end of this beer is a good example. You can tell on the back end of this, with it being a lighter beer, relying mostly on hops for flavor, that it was made with a little bit harder water. It's not a super off flavor. You don't know it's there unless you're looking for it.
Okay.
But, it is almost a little bit of an, oxide or oxidized taste. And the beer's not oxidized. You can tell because it's not gray.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's a little bit of an oxidation note that comes from the water. So if there's high iron content in your water, you're going to taste that. And it shows up differently in different beers. Stouts mask it better, and harder water actually is a little bit better for them because it makes them fuller. But
Okay.
ales, pilsners especially, like, you don't got clean water for a pilsner, you're going to find
Forget
it.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to find it.
Okay. Is that just more towards just like lagers in general? I mean, I mean, obviously we see how pilsners look and are, it's all meant to, you basically just look through them.
It's
Tastes
more
clean,
towards and it's more towards how much the water is going to have a place to shine in the beer, right?
Sure.
Is the best way I can put it. So if you're doing a stout or a porter, you've got a bunch of heavily roasted malts in there and a bunch of caramelized malts and, all sorts of grains that are going to give it different roasty, coffee, sweet types of flavors, to where the water isn't going to have as much of a profile to shine. If you're doing a pilsner where your malts are mostly clean, it's going to have a place to shine. If you're doing an ale where you're not using a ton of heavily roasted malts, like let's say you're doing a pale ale, IPAs where hop and bitterness goes so far, but you're still relying on a lot of water as well, because so I guess basically the best way I can put it, and Chris, keep me honest or tell me if I'm completely off base or if your opinion differs, but to me, it more so depends on the grains you're using. Also adjuncts notwithstanding.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using grains that have a ton of malt bill or a ton of flavor or a ton of roastiness to them, the water doesn't have as much room to shine, and you're going to have a lot more leeway with that. if you're using a bunch of clean grains that aren't roasted or that don't have a ton of natural malt backbone to them, if they're more like lightly sweet, like a Pilsner or a 2-row, water chemistry is going to make a much bigger difference. So it depends on the beer.
Okay.
It's actually fun. One of the brew clubs that I'll go and go to some of their meetings, they'll actually have like essentially the Pepsi challenge of same recipe, same yeast, but they'll use tap versus the water profile that's supposed to be for that style versus just straight like RO, like neutral.
Yeah.
And you can taste the difference.
That's what I would love to try that.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, diving into stuff like that, like where you can. I mean, it's almost easily noticeable that there's something different, and like Chris was saying, unless you're looking for it,
you don't know.
Then you wouldn't know
exactly. And like,
but if you have them side by side, I mean, they might slightly look different. There might be maybe a slight change in SRM. I mean, just slight differences. But again, unless you were holding them up side by side, I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to tell.
SRM is color, by the way, Dan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
No, I caught that. Yeah, I caught that.
Just making sure.
No, I got it.
Or listeners. I guess I can point it to listeners too.
Yeah.
SRM's color scale.
Yeah.
I'm like a step above like novice.
It's just shit that you don't know just from drinking it though, or from buying it. Like you see IBUs on the side of a can. You don't see SRM on the side of a can.
Yeah. Even though I don't know if a lot of people know what IBU stands for.
Fuck, even IBUs people get confused.
I got a question here for you. I know what IBU stands for, but how the hell do you actually measure it?
Yeah,
I have no idea. That's actually a good question.
Yeah, because okay, cool. We're in the same boat. I was talking about this the other day. When I was making the session, right? Because you have a target IBU, bittering units. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna hit that target IBU, and then I'm thinking it's like, okay, you track gravity because I know how to you measure it with the hydrometer. So those are numbers I track, and then from gravity you can typically deduce ABV, and there's a way to test for that. And SRM, you have a color scale, so you can test for that. But I'm like, how the shit do you know if you hit your IBU target?
Yeah, because I was always thinking that if it would be, I was almost thinking something as simple as if you use so many ounces and your alpha acids are at this percentage, then you could calculate like what the utilization, and you also know what your hop utilization rate is going to be. Then you can calculate what your IBUs are going to be. That's what I was thinking it was going to be, but I don't think that's the case. So I don't know. That's something.
Well, it's like everything else, right? Because how do you know what you can reasonably, I guess, assume what your utilization is, but it's just like gravity, right? If I put a bunch of grains into a grain calculator and I know, which maltster they're coming from, and I generally. And I know what my weight's going to be, then I should generally, and I know what my mash temp is, and I should generally know what type of sugar content I'm going to extract. But it never works that way. It's like bourbon math or anything else. It never works out the way the math works out. So it's like you don't know what your hop efficiency is. So how the hell does anybody know if you ever hit your IBU target?
Yeah, until you drink it.
Right, and even then you're only going to know if you're way off.
Yeah.
I'm not going to know if I'm the difference between 18 and 25 IBUs. I'll know the difference between 18 and 90. But,
and even then, like, it's really funny. So I've talked to customers that'll ask me about, like, well, I want a low bittering beer or whatever, and I'll show them a bunch of, if we're going like, to super dry hop bomb beer, super hazy beers that aren't, that are brewed and made to not, feature bitterness to their beers, and you'll look at the IBUs and it'll say like 35 on it, and I've had the beer. And to me personally, there's none on there, right? There's absolutely none. But to them, they're like, well, it says IBU, and then I'll ask, like, you don't even know what the fuck it stands for. Like, oh yeah, I got it.
Actually, there's an answer. Sure? There's an answer in the chat.
Oh, how do they do it?
Measured by spectral foamometer.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I will too. I've heard
Rubio coming in with the
knowledge here. Yeah, and I think that.
Pause for
pause for
Googling.
Googling
the intensity of light. Is that almost the same? Intensity of light by particle or something. Isn't that the same way that you can measure Gravity?
Yes. Yep. It's the more accurate way versus a hydrometer.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well, I have one of those for measuring gravity. I didn't know that you could do it the same way for hops.
And
Interesting.
yeah, and Beersmith, by the way, is an awesome utility. It
Oh, it's
spits
wonderful.
out freaking everything for you. But
Mhm.
yeah, thank you for that because
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, I would not have thought. I knew you could use it for gravity and then derive ABV and everything. I didn't know that's what you use it for ABU.
Interesting.
So-
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
So now I'm gonna have to try that.
And he obviously knows. So how the hell did we not get him on the show?
Right?
Sorry, Mister.
He'd be a way better guest
Mr.
than me.
Rubio.
I need,
I mean, come on.
Nah, but
You're doing great. All right,
direct,
so-
our director of guest appearances and
Sorry, I
our director
failed
of
you.
guest appearances, failed me on having a chance to go on another
I
podcast.
kept trying to ask people to come on.
I mean,
because
it's
I must
not-
have missed Mr. Rubio here.
Totally your fault. I didn't read my own DMs, but
No, you're good.
He would have schooled all of us.
yeah,
He needed to just. Anyways, all right.
For
so
sure.
last, kind of last part here. So we're not going to run on too long here. It's
we're at 2 hours. We
Or 2 hours
We
at
crossed
this
too
point.
long 30 minutes ago.
fuck it. So we got kind of one true question left, and then any other comments we want to throw in afterwards. But of all the beers you've made so far, both old and new, what has been the most challenging beer? It's been kind of hinted at, in base conversations that we've had so far tonight. But what has been the most challenging beer you've ever made? And did you reach your goals, or I guess did it kind of come up short?
So I'm gonna get philosophical here, Chris. To me, you
Yeah.
don't really know if a beer is challenging until you screw it up.
Yeah.
Guess that's
And then the real challenge is like dialing it in. I have a feeling that the most challenging beer I'm going to make is the one that's in the fermenter, which is the Bavarian Weiss Ale. Because, as we talked about earlier, doing traditional style beers, really, really difficult. Even though they don't feel difficult when you're building the mash bill, when you're building the recipe or anything like that. I have a feeling that that's going to be the biggest bear that I tackle from a challenge perspective, because there ain't no way that beer's coming out great the first try. It might be drinkable, it might be good. There ain't no way that beer's coming out great on the first try. And trying to dial in something like that, I think, is going to be a bit of a challenge. As far as like the most challenging thing that I've actually done so far, I think on that one for a second. It's not. It might actually be a tie between that Poblano beer I had earlier and that caramel apple beer I mentioned the other day, just as far as like crafting the recipe and everything else that went into it. Poblano beer is probably the hardest one, because you got to be real careful about infection when you're playing with roasted peppers in fermentation. So, because peppers don't naturally keep well anyway, so you got to be real freaking careful about that beer not getting infected. So that's probably the most difficult one so far. But if I had a hunch, that one that's in the closet right now is probably going to be the biggest bear to dial in.
I would say for me, because I've done competitions, the hardest beer, and this is probably why I don't submit to this category anymore. So if I'm trying to like hit the traditional like BJCP guidelines, trying to meet the guidelines for a traditional IPA is an absolute pain in the ass. There's just, for as broad as you can get within the category, because I mean, just if you pull up the notes, I mean, it's like you can say that it's supposed to be, medium light to medium bodied mouthfeel. I mean, even like your gravity targets are fairly wide ranged. But once you try and like hit some of those targets and then getting feedback from judges, and they're looking for like specific notes, they're looking for specific things like about that style that make it difficult to try and like, you have to, if you're not hitting that style and you go off the deep end and try and create something new, it's very difficult to wind up scoring as at least in a like decently within that particular category. So it's always been a problem area for me because I like making my own thing, but if you try and like make your own thing and then also submit to that category, yeah, don't bother. But at least from a creation standpoint, or at least like just going off on and doing my own thing, I have done a couple of pepper beers. Like I've done like some like mango habanero.
Yeah.
Like I've done that in the past. But it's just trying to get that right balance of spice without infecting the beer.
Mm-hmm.
But then also once you're introducing like the oils like from the pepper itself and making sure that's not going to add not necessarily a stringency, but daggone it, I forget the word that I'm looking for. But either way, just trying to balance what the natural flavor of the beer would wind up being versus trying to pile on too much in terms of adjuncts.
The other problem with oils too, and you have it with coffee as well, or chocolate, or anything else that's naturally oily, is trying to get the right amount of head on your beer, because you got to make sure that if you're putting that in adjunct wise, oil will kill head. So then you've got to go back and add like flaked barley or carapils or something else to help balance that out. So that's another trick when you're doing anything that's oily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's one of those things where you brew one and it's like, oh, I'm off my targets. What happened? Okay, I need to do this. So I don't think I've seen or like talked to anybody that's been able to hit one of those like right out the gate. It's one of those like you definitely need to have 3-4 iterations of it before you're really starting to dial that one in.
Well, I don't want to be like a humble brag or anything like that, but I definitely hit that one first try.
Look at you, man.
I mean, it took 6 months for the pepper to fall off enough for me to really like it, but it was still the first try. So
look at that.
You got there.
But it was poblano, which is a little easier to deal with too, because you're not dealing with a bunch of spice or anything like that. It's a smoky pepper. So
right, yeah. Because I've done stuff with jalapenos, and like I've done stuff with habaneros, and it's just never quite. I've never been able to hit it on the first try.
Yeah,
it's been like two, three iterations before.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah,
and it's a balancing act for sure. Like I said, I thought it was going to be a drain pour, and then I just didn't, because it's one of the things I was told early on was, if you think it's bad, just let it sit and revisit it in a month or two.
Mm-hmm. So you're much more patient than I am.
Especially bottle conditioning.
I would let it sit and just be like, I don't like it. Let's move on to the next one.
I have one up there right now that just turned a corner that I didn't like at first and almost got drain poured. I actually drain poured part of it anyway because I needed the bottles, but I actually kept hold of some of it because it turned a corner. I couldn't get cocoa nibs for the longest time. It was really weird. So I did a white stout, but I ended up, because I couldn't get cocoa nibs, I went to Trader Joe's and got like dark chocolate, almost no milk, no sugar. Dark chocolate covered cocoa beans, and crushed them with a meat tenderizer and used that in place of it. And then we did coffee beans in it that were aged in a bourbon barrel that my bourbon society picked.
Very nice.
And it was way heavy on coffee at first, but coffee, like fruit, wears off over time. So,
So I guess just to pivot off of this little conversation, like when you make a beer, obviously, with Chris, you've done multiple beers for this hopper. You're still, kind of, I guess doubling back. But like through the first recipes that you guys have made, what are some of the major, what are some of the major differences or I guess changes you wanted to make? Like, what are the biggest things you've learned from maybe transitioning from the first recipe or the first rendition of that recipe to maybe the second or third time you've made it? And I guess with Chris, or I guess with Hopper, but what are some of the things that you've picked up from the first time you've made a beer to maybe what you want to change into the second and third time you want to make it?
So the couple things that I have rebrewed, it really, again, it varies.
Sure.
There was one that came out a little bit darker where I adjusted the the crystal malt I was using, basically from a 60 back to a 40, which gives you a little less caramel flavor, but also gives you lighter color. This beer I'm drinking right now, I can already tell you that I want to use more late edition hops to bring out more aroma on it. If I were to go, I'm going to go back and rebrew the cream ale, and I can tell you that I want to use a bittering hop that is a little bit cleaner, as far as not imparting additional flavors, just really imparting bitter. It's one of those things that recipe to recipe is just going to vary. Like next time I go back and try to rebrew a chocolate marshmallow stout, I'm gonna want to not use meadow foam honey. I'm just gonna go use vanilla, for example. It was like an adjunct try that failed, right? And it's really about being able to troubleshoot and diagnose. But as far as kind of a general lessons learned, the more recipes I put together, because I think that's where I can provide value to this discussion. Less is more in a lot of instances. I think that, at least for me, when I came into this, it was, I want to try to do this, this, and this. It's really cool, but there's like 90 different things to it. That's how my second beer had me caramelizing wort, right? Mm-hmm. And then it was just the doubling back to realizing, hey, I probably didn't need to do that. I probably could have just achieved that with a little bit different grain bill. It's things like that you figure out as you go. Like, with hop additions, it's not so much less is more. It's, how do you adjust the hop schedule? But I mean, there's just little nuances I think you pick up with everything you brew about what would I do better, diagnosing what I would do better, and then diagnosing something to learn forward. Patience was the hardest thing for me to learn, as far as,
for sure.
All right, that beer's gonna suck. No, this should be drain poured. Well, maybe I should just walk away from it for a couple weeks, or maybe, give it a couple extra weeks in the fermenter to let some things settle out. Shit like that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I know that I definitely was not in that camp when I first started out, of just being patient. I was, like I was saying earlier, or at the very start of this conversation, I was definitely one of those guys that if I wasn't seeing airlock like within the first 10 to 12 hours, I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
I'm popping the top, and I'm swirling, trying to aerate it as much as possible so that I can maybe see some activity as soon as I can. Same thing when I was bottle conditioning, because now I'm lazy as all hell and I keg everything now. But like when I was bottle conditioning, it says, oh, okay, so if you're priming, you put so much in, because I was using there's a graphic in, I think it's Palmer's book, if I'm not mistaken, that shows you how many your volume of CO2 that you want versus how much sugar that you want to add to it. So I was like following that in order to measure out like how much you want, and then reading through the forms and all that. It's like, okay, so maybe wait another week to 10 days. Everything should be okay. All right, well, are we good? Oh, I don't have the carbonation I'm looking for. Well, what's wrong? Now is everything busted? Now I got to get rid of all of it. So it's just let it sit, let it mellow, let the science take over and do its thing. And it's not necessarily something that you always have to wind up pouring down the drain. It could just be something that just needs a little bit more time in order to get it to where that you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. All right, last one. It's been a lot of fantastic conversation, guys. Like, this has been, for those of you like me out there who haven't dived into this is a lot of fantastic conversation.
Hell, even if you don't plan on homebrewing and you just want to know how the shit you're buying off
craft beer
shelf's made, there's a lot of good information.
There's a lot of good combo. There's a lot of nerd talks. There's a lot of basic, there's all range of spectrums, guys. This has been.
Hey, if you want to know a lot on what not to do, I can tell you a lot on that too.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll say that for another episode.
Yeah. I could tell you, we could do a whole other show.
On how things have been screwed up.
All right. Well, we'll do one more. This is real quick here. What has been your most ambitious beer you've tried to make? Like, what is something that you were just like, fuck it, I want to go for it? Will that be with a bunch of adjuncts? Will that be trying to I guess, perfect something that you like. But what has been the most ambitious beer you've tried to make, and did you hit it, or did you, I guess, miss on it?
I think my most ambitious beer was the fruit IPA that I put together. So I wound up going into the experimental category at my very first competition. But it was, just a basic, basic IPA recipe. But then I tried to blend. It was like pineapple, strawberry, and apples together. And I was like, why would you even want to try and like blend all that stuff together? Would it even taste great? I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but since it's experimental category, why not?
Okay.
Yeah, let's see we'll see how it turns out. So got my pineapple, got everything, cut it up. The result was great because you could really taste the pineapple, but you really couldn't taste much of anything else. Because that's one of those things that definitely overpowers pretty much any other adjunct that you want to add into it.
Yep.
But it worked out great because that's how I got one of these that's hanging like right behind me.
There you go.
To be 100% clear, I don't have these hanging here because I'm that vain of a person. They just happen to be like there's natural hooks inside my office where I could hang them from something. So that's not the reason that they're there.
It's a slight humble break, bro. I appreciate it.
That's how I got one of these things that's hanging over here is because I was just thinking about something that I could create. And I was thinking about just random stuff that I can add in because at that point in brewing, I was already doing the pumpkin beer that I told you guys about earlier. Yeah. And I was like, I like adding stuff into it. I like trying to infuse a beer with like a natural taste, a natural flavor. So what else could I do? So let's just grab a whole bunch of citrus stuff together, throw it in a beer and see what happens. And so I got that.
Yeah, for me, I've talked about it a couple times already. My most ambitious beer is that caramel apple beer because it was just so much different bullshit that I tried to throw at that to make that work out. And it's like, we're going to get apple pie a la mode off of this. And not really. So, did I hit it? I mean, to me...
I tried it. Yeah.
To me...
To an extent, you did.
To an extent. To me, and that's what I was about to say. I had to make a baseball analogy. I hit it in the same way that you hit a lazy pop fly to center field.
There you go.
It'll play.
That's
you
good.
made contact. It'll play. But it wasn't exactly what I was going for. Nice flavors. Call it a line out to center field. There's some positives
There
to
you
take
go.
away from it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the end result isn't exactly what you're looking for. Will I go back and revisit it? I haven't decided yet. Maybe if I get bored. But there was so much that went into it and so much that I think I would do differently that I don't know that it would even come close to resembling what the first iteration was.
Right on. That's kind of it for me, guys. Hop let me take the reins on this one as homebrewing. It's while I don't plan on starting it anytime soon. As someone who's worked in the beer industry for 2 years from the off-premise side to now someone who's moving on to the other side of beer sales, this homebrew in general has always been a fun topic for me, just learning more and more about it. So, Chris, I 1,000% appreciate you coming back on. Hopefully we won't do the full year on thing again. I like to get you back on and to do a little more homebrew conversations. We'll obviously visit you out in August when we're at the expo this year. So
Yes, sir.
I fully appreciate you jumping on Hopper, obviously with your information, just with everything that you've learned. I've obviously learned a bunch from you already. So
yeah, it's good to pivot every now and again, and we could go another
longer
5 hours on
yeah,
things we
very
screwed
good.
up and equipment, and
easily.
different ways to do different things. So I mean, there will probably be a version 2 again, and we'll probably talk more football too. So or
obviously
else,
you
so.
gotta pick your mind
But
some more. About
hell, I'd like to when we're up there for the expo, maybe get some of our homebrewers on and just do a tasting panel or something, just to change it up a little bit.
Man.
That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, I would love
Perfect.
to. Like I said, I will be so I'll be there for the Kings Classic draft on Friday because I'm co-owning a team with Mike Woolert who works at 4for4 with me. So I'll be there for Friday night, Saturday, checking out, like hanging out with everybody there. Then Sunday, obviously for the expo.
Yeah.
So I will have growlers in hand. So we will be definitely there to do some bottle sharing or whatever.
Sure. We'll definitely be there on Saturday, probably midday, and we may drive all the way there on Friday if there's enough people coming in just to have more time to hang out and stuff. We haven't really haven't really hashed out all the specifics yet. But
We'll get there.
Because last time we stopped off in Indy so that we could do like 450 North and Sun King and hit a few breweries there, and then drove the rest of the way. Hit Brewdog and then drove the rest of the way the following day. So.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, for sure.
On Saturday, but we'll figure it out closer to and let you know, and definitely hook up for that because we like to do shows while we're there, and it looks really weird when we walk into the hotel because I'm carrying like boom stands and microphones and cameras and stuff.
Bring everything with us.
Yeah.
Looks like we're about to film a porno.
It's
but
not porno, I swear to God.
It's really just because everybody's in one place, and there's such
a bunch of nerds, man. We're just here for fantasy
there's
football.
such a different energy when you
porn.
get to record in person with people, to where we try to get as much of that done as we can. So cool. That's our show. Hope that you guys enjoyed this being a little different. We'll be hitting the draft hard and fast starting next week. We've got
a month's worth of draft content coming up.
Yep, we've got quarterbacks and running backs coming up, and then we've got wide receivers and tight ends the following episode, and then we've got, I guess it's time to start hyping this. We've got our live stream extravaganza where we'll set up a Zoom call. Dan and I will watch the first round. We'll give analysis on it, get progressively more drunk, and you never know who's going to show up for that. Because we pretty much just put the Zoom link to everybody we have on ever.
It's on fucking Twitter, pretty much.
Yeah, and let them pop in and out. Following that, we'll do a week or two of reactions. We'll react, day 1, day 2, and then day 3, and look at the overall structure, some rosters and stuff. And then beyond that, once we're out of the draft, probably some more one-off content like this. So
Yep.
Just a little look on what's coming up. Chris, one more time, where can people find you? Where can they find their content? Where can they find you on Twitter and stuff?
Yep, come yell at me on Twitter for my bad football takes or whatever I don't know about beer at Chris Allen FFWX. During the off season, I'll be primarily over at 4for4. But then once things start kind of ramping up throughout the off season, I'll be taking on maybe a little bit more over at NBC Sports Edge. Also kicking it with the guys over at footballguys.com, doing a couple shows over there. So, I mean, you'll see me around. I'll probably wind up on somebody's show at some point.
For sure. You can find us right here, Beerfield Fantasy Football on YouTube. We haven't figured out how to change. We haven't figured out how to change the name yet on YouTube.
One way.
And mostly because I haven't looked. Beerfield, wherever you get podcasts, website and stuff coming soon. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next time, which is 9:30 next week, 8:30 next week. I don't remember, Dan.
8:30, 9 o'clock.
Special time.
Central time.
8:30, 9
more
o'clock
guests
Central.
coming on. So yeah, next week for quarterbacks running backs next week.
See ya.
Yep.
Peace.